writing a diary to vent, and let Iron Man see it. This video is purely for entertainment, and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting, and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76 Lin Feng. I'm the protagonist of Gaudeo Liu. Iron Man without the protagonist's halo is indeed a bit fragile, Lin Feng said with emotion. In the movie, it seems that those superheroes can fight 50-50 with anyone, but that is a compromise made by the movie out of the need to balance the combat power of superheroes. It is also the result of Kevin Feige's special planning at a very early time, and the consistency of the style and strength of superheroes with different power systems. If you put it in the Marvel world, it is their protagonist halo that works, so it seems that they can fight 50-50 with anyone. For example, the most obvious is Captain America, Steve Rogers, who is 50-50 with Bucky the Winter Soldier, 50-50 with Iron Man Tony Stark, and can fight back and forth with Thanos, focusing on a 50-50 feature. But what is the reality? Except for the real protagonists on the sacred timeline, other superheroes do not have the protagonist halo to protect them. For example, in the zombie Marvel universe, Tony Stark, who was stabbed by Thanos, but could not die, became a zombie casually, and finally had his head chopped off. Captain America Steve Rogers is not much better, and Doctor Strange Stephen Strange is even more of a classic. He has destroyed countless universes, and killed countless people. So the protagonist's halo is really a mysterious thing. Lin Feng is very self-aware. He knows that he is not the protagonist, and cannot be protected by the protagonist's halo, so he must hide himself, and dare to come out to show off, when he is sure of complete self-protection. To use his own self-deprecating words, if he were the protagonist of a book, he should be considered a hide-and-seek person, right? Doghead. In the real world, the strength is not as unclear as in the movie universe. If you have reached it, you have reached it, and if you have not reached it, you have not reached it. In the first generation of the Avengers, the strength echelons are also very obvious. The first echelon is of course the Hulk and Thor. These two are not only the upper limit of the current Avengers' strength. With their strength, we can probably tell from the fight against the Chitauri in the plot of Avengers 1, that they basically have the ability to single-handedly destroy an army of Chitauri. Unfortunately, in the plot of Avengers 1, the Chitauri invaded, not just one army, but an endless stream of them, which made them more and more exhausted. In the Marvel world, although personal strength is very important, if it has not reached the minimum level similar to the father level or the single universe level, then it will still be overwhelmed in the face of the army. Moreover, these two have not reached their own upper limit. The setting of the Hulk is that the more angry he is, the stronger he is, and his strength will continue to grow. In battle, his anger will only continue to increase. In theory, there is no limit. Of course, that is the comic version, and the movie version still has a limit. Thor, on the other hand, has not yet understood the law of thunder and lightning, and even made a joke. When Odin sealed Thor's hammer, he immediately lost his divine power, making it unclear whether he was Thor or Thor the Hammer. It was very funny, but later in Thor 3, after he completely understood his own thunder power, his strength went up a level. Although he was still hung up and beaten when facing Hela, he finally had to use the power of the fire giant Surtur to destroy Asgard before killing his sister. Later, when facing Thanos, he was hung up and beaten again, watching his people being slaughtered, and only 2 or 3 kittens escaped to the earth. It seems a bit useless, but that's only because he is facing 2 of the strongest beings in the first phase of Marvel. In fact, Thor's combat power at that time was already firmly the first of the first generation of Avengers. In addition, with the Stormbreaker he obtained later, he even hit Thanos hard in Avengers 3 and almost killed him. It can be seen that at that time, Thor's combat power, combined with the Stormbreaker, was already strong enough to threaten the father level. In addition, his own bloodline had infinite possibilities. Theoretically, there were only 3 people in the royal bloodline of Asgard, 2 of whom were father level. There was no reason why Thor did not have such a talent. Lin Feng knew that in the comic version, there was a setting that the older the bloodline of Asgard, the more powerful it was. Even if the royal family of Asgard did not practice, their strength would continue to increase as they got older. If the movie version also had this setting, it would only be a matter of time before Thor entered the father level. Whether in terms of strength or potential, he was the first person in the first generation of the Avengers. It was just that his brain was not working well in the early stage, and he looked stupid. The second echelon was the early Iron Man Tony Stark, and the American Captain Steve Rogers. One of them used the armor, and the other used the power of the super soldier serum, and both had combat power far beyond that of ordinary people. The third echelon is Black Widow Natasha and Hawkeye Barton. Without the halo of the protagonists on the sacred timeline, they are just super soldiers. Lin Feng didn't know what to say. In this world, the rich rely on technology, the poor rely on mutation, or rely on their own blood. If he didn't have such a magical thing as a diary, he would probably be a third generation rich man and stay away from New York and never participate in these super events of superheroes. Just when Lin Feng's thoughts were flying, Tony Stark was blown away directly, and Jarvis's warnings were all around his ears. The armor is 80% damaged, and the energy is seriously insufficient. It is not recommended to continue fighting. It is not recommended to continue fighting. Tony Stark fell and felt that his brain was about to be shaken apart. He originally wanted to see the strength of this destroyer armor, but after the real fight, he found that it was different from what he showed in the video. The combat power of the destroyer armor in the video was not too outrageous, especially since it was defeated by Thor, who regained his power in just a few moves, as if that was all. But after the real fight, he realized that he was totally wrong. After only one blow, cracks appeared on the shell of his highly hard alloy armor, and then his speed could not keep up with the destroyer armor. After another direct shot from the destroyer armor, the armor was basically broken, and it would completely collapse into many pieces if it was hit again. This was the first time he encountered an opponent of this level. Compared with the destroyer armor, a badass Iron Overlord was simply an oversized toy. Chapter 77. Iron Man is defeated and takes out a small notebook to hold a grudge. Although Tony Stark is smart, he has only been Iron Man for less than a year. It can be said that his iron armor has only been iterated for a short time, and he is facing the armor of God King Odin. If he can easily catch up with it, then the inheritance of Asgard for so many generations will basically be in vain. After all, God King Odin is not the founder of Asgard. There are still generations of accumulation above him. In his generation, he finally became a father-level existence, and his daughter, the goddess of death Hela, also entered the father level. In the end, the two of them united the 9 realms and became one of the top forces in the entire universe. And Odin's destroyer armor is one of the pinnacle products of magic creation in Asgard for tens of thousands of years or even longer. Whether it is the materials or the magic patterns, they are all at the pinnacle. Tony Stark's current armor is simply incomparable. Didn't Nick Fury say that Lin Feng has arrived? Why haven't you made a move yet? This is too cowardly. Tony Stark gritted his teeth and said. Nick Fury's voice came to his ears. Tony, the people in the town have been evacuated. You can leave. Nick Fury didn't need to say anything. Tony Stark had already left the scene, rolling and crawling. Although it was not elegant, his current state of the armor could not withstand the next blow. He had already memorized the destroyer armor in his heart and remembered this grudge. He took a small notebook to write it down. He would develop an anti-destroyer armor later. It was really embarrassing today. God bless, it would be better if no one took a picture and posted it online. Otherwise his reputation in this life would be ruined. The destroyer armor alone beat everyone to pieces. Whether it was the Asgardian warriors who followed Thor, or Iron Man Tony Stark who came to help, or the agents of SHIELD, they were no match at all. Faced with this situation, Thor seemed to understand that he had to go through that. He murmured to himself, "Father, is this what you want? Sacrifice, King?" He walked towards the destroyer armor step by step, and then said, "Loki, let them go. They are just ordinary people. There is no obstacle for you. If killing me can calm your anger, then do it. Don't harm others. But what you did today cannot be called a qualified king. If you want to get the throne, then this road will not work. I don't need you to teach me." Loki's furious voice came from the destroyer armor. Obviously, he had heard enough of this kind of teaching, especially when he knew that he was not a member of the EC, but a frost giant. In an instant, inferiority surged in his heart. For him, he had already understood why he could not catch up with Thor, no matter how hard he tried, since he was a child, and even his father never regarded him as the heir to the throne. They are both princes of Asgard, but their status is too different. Thor could lead the army and even be made the crown prince, but even if he gave everything, he could not make his father look at him more. He used to think that he had not worked hard enough because he could feel that his father loved him, so it might be simply because he was not the eldest son, or because he had not done well enough. But now he finally understood that, even if he was the eldest son, no matter how well he did, the throne could not be his, because he was the son of Laufey, the leader of the Frost Giants, the mortal enemy of the EC. Just based on this point, he could not become the king of Asgard. The anger in his heart now burned everything. You have everything since childhood. What qualifications do you have to teach me? Loki roared. In a flash, the destroyer armor blasted Thor away with a direct blow. Thor did not resist at all, and took the blow abruptly, and was killed in an instant. The destroyer armor is too powerful for ordinary people. Lin Feng didn't want to care about anything. He just wanted to see how long Odin could endure, and when he would give his son the authority. He had been speculating maliciously before. If Thor didn't wake up in time, would Odin rather die than restore his power, or would he ignore any test? He didn't have any filters for Odin. Although the original book didn't say much about Odin, and Odin seemed to be a wise, kind, and merciful old man, Lin Feng knew very well how brave and good at fighting this old man was when he was young. The leader of the Frost Giants, Laufey, called him Father God. Was it because he was willing to crawl at the feet of the EC? That was because he was defeated. Even the leaders of the previous generation of Frost Giants might have been killed by Odin. In addition, there are dark elves, dwarves, fire giants, etc. Which one is sincerely crawling at the feet of the EC? There is nothing wrong with Odin calling him the Iron-Blooded Emperor when he was young. All his kindness now is just because of the hidden injuries in his body and the long-term suppression of the goddess of death Hela. It has gradually become his new personality. And the new generation, such as Thor and Loki, don't even know that their father has such an iron-blooded and ruthless side. However, Loki seems to be completely enraged by Thor this time. The destroyer armor did not give up after killing Thor, but launched a large-scale destruction. It will not take long for it to be dismantled to Lin Feng. It seems that I can only take action. Lin Feng put on a hood, put on a mask, and rushed out directly as a Homelander. Under Loki's control, the destroyer armor was destroying crazily, venting the anger in Loki's heart, but the next second, a figure was seen to be extremely fast. In an instant, it directly knocked the destroyer armor out, and flew out of the town. In Asgard, Loki was stunned. What the hell? What big black rat brushed past long ago? But a moment later, through the perspective of the destroyer armor, he saw that this was a human, but he couldn't see his face clearly, because of the mask. Loki became even angrier. A mere mortal dared to attack him. The next second, a fist as big as a casserole smashed down at Lin Feng. And Lin Feng was not polite either, and punched him as well. Boom. A huge roar, accompanied by a huge wave of air, spread out in all directions with the two of them as the center. Chapter 78, End of the story. Understanding the thermal vision. Homelander. Many residents of the small town who were watching the battle from a distance saw Lin Feng and immediately recognized him. Apparently, Lin Feng's costume has become quite famous during this period. He finally made a move. Tony Stark breathed a sigh of relief, and then he was like seeing a ghost, because after punching the destroyer armor, Lin Feng did not move at all, but the destroyer armor retreated a few steps. Countless question marks popped up in his mind. Is this a normal human? He knew best how powerful the destroyer armor was. He had experienced it himself, and it was much more terrifying than what was shown in the video. He only took one punch, and the alloy of his whole body was almost shattered, and then he was swept away in 2 seconds. But Lin Feng was able to not lose at all. No, he had the upper hand. Although he knew that Lin Feng himself would occasionally tease himself in his diary that he was no longer a human being, he didn't expect it to reach this level. But then, the confrontation continued. This time, Lin Feng was unreserved because he knew that he didn't need to hold back. This was not the minions he usually fought when he was chivalrous. This was the armor that Odin used to conquer the 9 realms. Boom. 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 Every collision between the two sides would set off a huge wave of air, and Lin Feng directly hit the destroyer armor and made it retreat again and again. Not enough, not enough, Lin Feng muttered privately. At this time, his physical body had reached the pinnacle, and he had completely developed the primary panel of the Homelander. It was difficult to be injured by guns and cannons, and his strength had reached an exaggerated level. If Captain America's power burst was 3 to 4 tons, and Spider-Man's regular power could reach 15 to 20 tons, then Lin Feng's power was at least 50 tons, so he could suppress the destroyer armor. But every time Lin Feng's terrifying power fell on it, a burst of golden light would emerge from its body, and a mysterious rune would emerge, removing Lin Feng's power. Lin Feng could not completely defeat the energy of this rune with just strength. Unlike the video in which Thor returned to his position and dismantled the destroyer armor in just a few moves, the current destroyer armor showed a far greater combat power than that shown in the video. However, with Odin's strength, if the destroyer armor was only that level, there would be no need to create it. So Lin Feng seriously suspected that Odin, the old man, had cheated his son and deliberately weakened the destroyer armor. Now when facing Lin Feng, he did not hold back. So now Lin Feng could only delay the destroyer armor. After all, this thing was driven by magic, and it was not like Tony Stark's armor that ran out of power after a while. During the battle, Lin Feng gradually forgot his original purpose and simply enjoyed the feeling of this crazy battle. He only felt that a force was gathering in his eyes. Suddenly, it turned into 2 terrifying red lights and shot directly at the destroyer armor. In an instant, it broke the golden rune on the destroyer armor, instantly pierced through the chest of the destroyer armor, and burned a small hole on it. This is thermal vision. Lin Feng was also a little confused. He didn't expect that in the fierce battle, he actually made some kind of breakthrough and comprehended thermal vision. This pure energy attack gave him the ability to destroy magic runes in an instant. Although it cannot completely destroy the destroyer armor, it has the ability to severely damage the destroyer armor. This is the first superpower of the Homelander he developed. Jarvis, did I see it wrong just now? He shot red lasers from his eyes? Tony Stark said in astonishment. Sir, you are not mistaken. It is indeed a red laser. The temperature of an instant may exceed 5,000 degrees after measurement. Jarvis replied. He has a new superpower. From a distance, Nick Fury also saw the thermal vision shot out of Lin Feng's eyes in the distance, and was also dumbfounded. Compared with half a year ago, Lin Feng's ability has undergone earth-shaking changes. He thought he would not be surprised until he saw such an outrageous scene. Before Lin Feng could be happy that he had broken through the restrictions of the attribute panel and awakened his first superpower, thunderclouds suddenly appeared in the sky, and bursts of thunder came. Then he sensed something wrapped in a ball of thunder power rushing over it in astonishing speed. Here it comes. Lin Feng knew that it was Thor the Thunder God who had resurrected. Sure enough, no matter what, Odin would never give up his eldest son. After all, with his eldest daughter sealed, he actually only had one son left. Although Loki was also a son, there was still a layer between them. This was human nature, which even the God King could not avoid. At this time, Loki, who had just been stunned by Lin Feng's awakened heat vision, noticed the unusual movement over there. Thor the Thunder God, who was supposed to have been killed by him, was resurrected in full state. Not only did he not die, but he also recovered his divine power and turned back into Thor the Thunder God. Damn it. Loki yelled, but it was too late to think about it, because after Thor recovered his own divine power, he used Thor's hammer with the huge power of Thor, and instantly blasted the destroyer armor away. Lin Feng noticed that the golden rune that he could not break was easily defeated by the power of thunder, and even tiny cracks appeared on the destroyer armor. He was secretly surprised by the combat power added by Thor's hammer. In terms of real combat power, Lin Feng was not necessarily worse than Thor, but when he added Thor's hammer, the combat power added was too much, especially when fighting this kind of magic creation. Lin Feng's pure physical attack seemed insufficient. However, Lin Feng was not in a hurry, because although Thor's upper limit was far more than that, at least reaching the farther level, His upper limit was far more than that, and sooner or later he would be able to draw some powerful abilities, and it was still unknown who would win and who would lose at that time. Then Lin Feng saw Thor and the destroyer armor fighting each other. Thor kept swinging Thor's hammer to form a terrible storm, which directly brought the destroyer armor into the air and fought together. Then, just like the plot in the video, Thor almost effortlessly destroyed the destroyer armor in a few strokes. It can be said to be a crushing defeat. After solving the destroyer armor, Thor fell down and came to Lin Feng and said, "Thank you for helping me hold it for a while." Lin Feng's performance in the battle against the destroyer armor just now has been recognized by the arrogant Thor. Chapter 79 Eyes, Iron Man, come out and pay your taxes. When Thor first appeared, he was almost on par with Tony Stark. Both of them were born in prominent families and were very capable, so they were arrogant and looked down upon ordinary people. But if they could be recognized by them, they would become very reliable friends. Now Lin Feng has obtained such qualifications. His amazing fighting power distinguishes him from ordinary earthlings in the eyes of Thor. But I have important things to deal with now. I'll treat you to a drink when I come to Earth again. Thor left directly after saying this and returned to Asgard to deal with his brother Loki's affairs. Lin Feng didn't say much. This time he was a first-line spectator and even participated in it himself, enjoying a hearty battle. However, there are pros and cons. The good thing is that he finally awakened the first superpower of Homelander under pressure. This is an ability that does not rely on the panel to awaken. Although it is still at the elementary level, it shows that his previous guess is correct. After integrating Homelander's panel, Homelander's ability is actually hidden in his blood. It does not necessarily need to draw a more advanced panel. It is also feasible to develop it by himself. But the disadvantage is that he may have officially entered the sight of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is more troublesome. He is not afraid that S.H.I.E.L.D. will cause any trouble. After all, S.H.I.E.L.D. is still a justice and lawful camp. He is afraid that the Hydra parasitic on S.H.I.E.L.D. will discover his secret. His family is just ordinary people and may become the target of Hydra. In the final analysis, he is not strong enough. Lin Feng sighed and left immediately. After a circle, he returned to the town, took his luggage, and prepared to return to New York. At this time, Tony Stark was struggling to take off his armor, which was almost broken. Next to him was Nick Fury. "What do you think of Lin Feng's current combat power?" Nick Fury said. "What else can I think? He is no longer a human being anyway." Tony Stark took off his armor and said, "But he is willing to stand up at the critical moment, which shows that he has not lost his humanity and has not been devoured by the powerful force. This is good news. You know, it's like a poor man who suddenly becomes rich. Many people have not passed this level. Their state of mind and morality cannot match wealth and power." Nick Fury nodded. It was true. There have been many people who suddenly exploded throughout the ages, but only a very small number of them can seize the opportunity and achieve class transition, especially when the poor suddenly become rich, and they did not rely on their wealth step by step. But the real trouble is that we know that Asgard may be much more powerful than we thought. The armor was vulnerable when facing Thor, the god of thunder, but I really tried to fight and almost got killed. Tony Stark said with lingering fear. At this time, he really put away his heart of underestimating the heroes of the world. He just invented a battle armor. There are many people in this world who are more powerful than him. Also, leave me a copy of this armor. Tony Stark said. Thor didn't care about the remaining fragments of the destroyer armor, but in the eyes of Nick Fury and Tony Stark, this was a good thing. Whether it was the material or the magic runes contained in it, it was definitely far beyond the current technological level of mankind. After Tony Stark took off his armor and changed his clothes, Happy was already waiting outside. A private helicopter took him to the airport, and then he flew back to New York on a private plane. Nick Fury also left Coulson to deal with the follow-up of this matter, and he also returned to New York. When Tony Stark returned to his mansion in New York, it was already late at night. He was really exhausted, but he still forced himself to be energetic. What happened today gave him too much shock, especially after fighting with the destroyer armor in person and seeing Lin Feng, Thor and the destroyer armor fighting. He deeply understood how big the gap was between himself and these inhuman monsters. Jarvis, analyze the armor. Thor, and Lin Feng's strength, speed, and output power in the video of this battle, and enter them into the database. Then, based on the information in the database, readjust the research and development direction of the anti-series armor. Tony Stark said. He felt a little headache. He felt that every time he developed an anti-series armor, he had to go through twists and turns, constantly overturn and start over, because the combat power shown by the target person obviously exceeded the previous estimate. Okay, sir, the data is being analyzed. I will notify you when there is a result, Jarvis said. But before Tony Stark could answer, he received a call from Pepper Potts. As soon as he turned on the call button, Pepper Potts' very dissatisfied voice came from inside, roaring, "Why did you run to New Mexico? Do you know your identity? If you are beaten to death, what will happen to the company?" Tony Stark held his forehead with his hand, and he felt a little headache. The more he worried about something, the more it would happen. The way he fought was probably filmed and uploaded to the internet. He didn't have time to scold Nick Fury for not controlling public opinion on the internet. He quickly explained for a long time before finally pacifying Pepper. "There is another thing, that is, the eyes came to our door," Pepper said. "Why did they come to me? Isn't there a professional accounting team to take care of our company's tax issues?" Tony Stark was a little confused. This ICE is the legendary and dreaded US Internal Revenue Service, but large companies like them usually have professional teams to help evade taxes, and rarely fall into their hands. They said that the batch of arms that Abate secretly sold to the Middle Eastern warlords before did not pay taxes, and now they want us to pay the taxes. Pepper replied a little speechlessly. Hearing this, Tony Stark was so angry that he laughed and almost wanted to curse out the word starting with F. Listen, is this human language? It said that it was sold secretly, which is smuggling. You have to collect taxes for smuggling. Do you have any humanity? Tomorrow you consult the legal department to see if we have to pay taxes in this situation. If we do, then we have to pay taxes. If not, let the legal department sue them. It costs a lot of money to support them every year. Tony Stark said helplessly. After hanging up the phone with Pepper, Tony Stark received a notice from Jarvis that Lin Feng was writing a diary. Chapter 80, The Severity of Ragnarok. Tony Stark rushed to the underground secret room, and soon, everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. also started to go online. Except for Coulson, who was still finishing up. Several other confidants of Nick Fury also went online. Today, I just wanted to eat melons in the front row, but I didn't expect that I would get involved in the grievances of Odin's family. I also witnessed the beginning of the repeated tugs of war between Thor and Loki. Odin, the old man, almost flipped over. If I hadn't held the destroyer armor, he might have really flipped over today, making him like to play these tests all day. But it's understandable, if you think about it. After all, he doesn't have many years to live, and Thor's growth is far from enough to take over the throne of Asgard. Asgard's Ragnarok is inevitable, and I'm afraid he knows it very well. But he probably didn't expect that Asgard after Ragnarok could be so tragic. As a civilization and race, it's almost genocide. Thor's life as a star of misfortune has just begun. At this time, in the palace of Asgard, Thor and Odin were looking at the diary in Thor's hand. Odin's wise eyes flashed with a bit of incredible expression. He has seen a lot in his life, but he has never seen such a thing. There are people from other universes. The universe he knows is also a multiverse, but in addition to the main universe, the remaining universes are probably similar to the Dark Dimension, Hell, and Heaven. It can even be said that their Asgard cannot be considered to exist normally in the main universe. Otherwise, how can there be a city floating in the universe? Have you seen such a strange place? But now, Lin Feng's diary mentions another concept, that is, the real and complete other universes. There is also the Earth in other universes, and there may even be their Asgard, another Odin, and another Thor. This is another level of cognition. And in Lin Feng's diary, you can even see the future of their timeline, and even the future of different timelines. There is even a timeline where Thor was shot to death by an arrow. Seeing his eldest son die and his youngest son lead troops to take revenge, his heart instinctively twitched slightly, and he finally understood what Lin Feng meant by that he might overturn. So he pretended not to see the name that Lin Feng called him Leo Deng in the diary, which was obviously a bit joking. According to the video demonstrated by Lin Feng in the diary, it was the same him, but at different times. He made different choices, which led to the occurrence of 2 timelines, and he overturned in both timelines. The first overturn was of course a test of the eldest daughter, the goddess of death Hela. Originally, he wanted to give her the meaning of life, so he deprived Hela of her divine power and artifacts, and expelled her to the earth. Who knew that Hela became a materialistic liberation fighter and completely overturned him? And he also wanted to liberate the enslaved people in the entire universe. It is completely imaginable that he was depressed in another timeline. The second time he failed was when his beloved eldest son Thor came to Earth. Because he lost the protection of divine power, he was shot to death by an arrow. It was so outrageous. These 2 scenarios are obviously in another timeline, but if he encounters any one of them, it would be too much to bear. Especially the second one. After the eldest daughter Hela was suppressed, all hope was on Thor. If even Thor got into trouble, then Asgard would be really finished. Although he wanted to teach Thor that Asgard is a people, not a place, there is a premise. If even the royal family of Asgard died, then what is the meaning of the people of Asgard's existence? Although many years have passed, he is still the once ruthless king of Asgard and the lord of the 9 realms. Thor, the star of damnation? When Odin saw this comment, he instinctively got angry, because he also knew what the word meant in the Chinese context, but many other universes appeared in Lin Feng's diary, including things in the future, which made him suppress his anger. And when he also read the diary, a great fear appeared in his mind. If he went to find Lin Feng, he would die before he found Lin Feng. Father, it says here that Loki and I will fight again and again. Does it mean that Loki is not dead? Thor said with joy. Because after he returned to Asgard during the day, he had a big battle with Loki, and finally even woke Odin from his deep sleep. In the end, Loki chose to let go and fell directly into the void of the universe. He thought his brother was dead. In that environment, no one could resist, even if his brother was a god. The gods of this world are not the invincible gods in mythology. They are stronger than ordinary people, but they still have birth, aging, illness and death. Even if they are heavenly beings, their life level is far beyond that of ordinary life forms, and they still have to face the problem of life and death. When Odin heard this, he also showed some joy on his face, because he felt guilty about Loki. From the perspective of blood, he would never pass the throne of Asgard to Loki, but after raising him for so many years, it is impossible for him to have no feelings at all. He originally thought that he would lose his second son forever, but he had to make a choice between his eldest son and the second son, and he had no other choice. However, now he was told that everything seemed not to be the case. His second son was still alive. If that's the case, you can bring him back, if you have the chance in the future. Odin said. No matter what, he is the second prince of Asgard. I won't blame him. Hearing this, Thor was a little panicked. He said, Father, you are not really like what he said. God King Odin sighed. He wanted to deny it at the first time, just like before, but he suddenly thought of the content in Lin Feng's diary. He suddenly realized that he had spoiled his eldest son too much before. He almost treated him like a child, so after more than 1,000 years, he was still so reckless, and Hela, who was the same age, had already matured mentally. Chapter 81. This is truly a critical moment for Asgard's survival. It is because of the different positioning of both parties. When Hela was born, Odin was at the peak of his life. He was also a master of the father level. It can be said that he was ambitious and wanted to conquer the 9 realms on the world tree and even the universe. So Hela, who was born at that stage, became Odin's killing tool. All her strength was squeezed out to better serve him to conquer the universe. When Thor was born, Odin no longer had the desire to conquer the universe, or he had already recognized the reality of this universe, and knew that the water in this universe was very deep, so he had given up long ago. In addition, he was seriously injured, and had long lost his ambitions in his early years. He just wanted to live a stable life. Therefore, Thor's positioning was a thorough second-generation rich man. Although it seemed that he also let him lead the army, gave him the best education, and tried every means to increase his strength. But compared with Hela, who was also a creator of the first generation, that was a small witch compared to a big witch. That was the existence that really crawled out of the pile of dead people. Even until now, Odin just wanted to shelter Thor from the wind and rain and leave him the last few years of happiness. However, now that Lin Feng said this, is his idea really right? Instead of letting him live a few years without worries, it is better to tell him in advance, so that he can prepare in advance. Besides, the comment of the Star of Fate has always been of great concern to him. Because he will definitely die, there is no doubt about it. As his injuries continue to worsen, he continues to age, and his divine power is lost faster and faster. Sooner or later he will not be able to suppress his eldest daughter Hela, and it is impossible to release him now. If he is released now, and a fight really breaks out, he will not be able to resist for long, and will have to die. After all, the fist is afraid of the young, and this is the same for the gods. But except for himself, who is bound to die, others may not have to die, such as his wife Queen Frigga, such as Loki, they may not have to die. And if the so-called Star of Fate is to be met, then these people will have to die. So he hesitated. Yes, I really don't have a few years left. Odin sighed and looked at Thor, the god of thunder, and said, with nostalgia and reluctance in his eyes, there is a great terror between life and death. If it is not really certain death, who can be willing? Even over the years, he has struggled and tried every way to treat his injuries, but it was useless. It seemed like fate. How could this be possible? Thor was stunned. He didn't dare to believe it at all. Even though Lin Feng had said in his diary before that his father would die, he thought it might be many years later, but he didn't expect it to be just a few years. Impossible. The lifespan of our Reese royal family can't be so short. Thor said hurriedly. They, the EC, did not emerge from the stone out of thin air. Naturally, they were passed down from generation to generation. Ordinary people can still live for more than 5,000 years, and the royal family is the best among them. Odin himself is a father-level existence, and his lifespan is even longer. Now he has lived for at least tens of thousands of years, which can be regarded as an antique. Among the EC, at best, he is just about to enter old age. As for death, it is even more unknown when it will come. The lifespan of the royal family of the EC can be at least more than 100,000 years, so he never thought that his parents would really leave him. So when he first saw Lin Feng's diary, he was even furious. In his opinion, this was not a prophecy, but a curse. If Odin can only live for a few more years, it is basically no different from the previous emperor who died halfway through his career. But this is reality. You also saw in the diary video how I expelled and sealed your sister. In fact, that battle was even more tragic than what was shown in the video, and I had been injured before, so now, I'm just holding on. Odin sighed. No one's ambition is born for no reason. His ambition is based on his father-level strength, plus his daughter is a father-level, and Asgard has accumulated strength for many years. Similarly, no one's ambition disappears for no reason. He gave up, because in the process of unifying the 9 realms, he saw how terrible this universe is. It is unfathomable just on Earth. The Supreme Sorcerer Ancient One is just a big boss on the surface. In fact, he is far more than that. The same is true in the entire universe, and some can even hurt him. Not to mention that the process of falling out with his daughter, the goddess of death Hela, is far from being as light as shown in the video. He sent the Valkyries to deal with her, and what was the result? The Valkyrie Corps that Asgard relied on for war was annihilated, and other elite corps suffered countless losses. Although more than 1,000 years have passed, Asgard is still just an empty shell. It is because ordinary Asgardians can live for 5,000 years, so their reproductive ability is also linked to age, and becomes very weak. For more than 1,000 years, a new generation has been barely born. If it were ordinary Earthlings, the population would have increased dozens of times. Hearing this, Thor was dumbfounded. No wonder in his eyes, his father has become weaker and weaker over the years, so that Asgard's rule over the 9 realms is shaky. Except for the dwarves who have a good relationship with Asgard, the others are more domineering than the others, such as Laufey, the leader of the Frost Giants, who calls him Father God, but it does not prevent him from taking action if he disagrees with them. As for territories like the Earth, they only claim it, but they have never really ruled it. He thought that all this was due to his father's old age and weakness, so he had to re-establish his prestige and prepare for the future succession. This is also the origin of the plot of Thor. Now he understands that his father is not inexplicably weak, but he really can't fight anymore and can only live for a few years. The prestige of Asgard depends on his tiger power. If a fight really breaks out, it will be exposed immediately. At that time, it will be a crisis of national extinction. At this time, Thor, who was originally passionate and always wanted to make achievements, calmed down instantly. He knew that he couldn't continue like this. No wonder Lin Feng always teased him as a fool. It turned out that he really didn't know anything. The joy I had felt upon learning that my brother was still alive suddenly diminished a lot. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 Thor, are you the god of thunder or the god of hammer? What about this Ragnarok? Thor looked at his father Odin and asked. Originally, he really didn't take the so-called Ragnarok seriously. Ragnarok was just something that the Earthlings wrote when they wrote myths. He just thought it was funny, but would people get angry with ants? No, so he didn't get angry. But now he knows that Ragnarok will not only happen, but it will also be very tragic. I don't know about this, but Odin seemed to have thought of something. He seemed to have thought of what the so-called Ragnarok was, but it was useless to say it now, so he immediately spoke. In Lin Feng's diary, since it says that you are the star of destiny, it means that at least you will survive to the end. No matter what form Ragnarok unfolds, you must have enough strength. If you have the strength of a father, then nothing will become a problem. After all, you are still not trained enough. I spoiled you too much in the past few years. Thor wanted to refute, but he knew he couldn't. Although he had been through wind and rain and fought for Asgard for many years, it was really far from the dangers of his father and sister in the early stages of their careers. Fortunately, we still have time, child. You still have a few years. I will try my best to guide your strength. When the time comes, I will save more people, especially your mother, and take good care of her for me. Odin sighed and said with love. Listening to Odin's words, that were almost like his last words, Thor's eyes were red. He began to regret why he didn't practice well before, why he was so complacent so early, and ended up not being able to save anything. I will, not only my mother, but also Loki. I won't let anything happen to him, Thor hastily assured. But I'm afraid I can't do it. I don't have that much potential. Thinking of the strength of his father and sister, Thor really didn't have the confidence to reach that level. You can, but you don't understand where the core of your power is. So let me ask you, what god are you? Are you Thor? Or the god of hammers? Odin pointed out in advance. Of course I'm Thor. Thor said immediately, but he immediately lost confidence because he understood what his father meant. He relied too much on Thor's hammer. This thing even originally belonged to his sister, and the previous owner might be his father. But none of them relied on Thor's hammer, but only he relied too much on the power of Thor's hammer in the past, and relaxed his practice. Now he finally knew where the problem was. When you don't rely on Thor's hammer and still have the current strength, you can be considered to have truly entered the door, Odin said meaningfully. At the same time, on Earth, the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony Stark couldn't help but look at each other, a little bewildered. After a moment, Hawkeye Barton said, we said before that we might not be able to wait for Ragnarok in this lifetime, but now it seems that it may be in a few years. Odin will die in a few years, and then Ragnarok will happen, and Asgard will be annihilated. Everyone didn't speak, but they were also very shocked, especially for Nick Fury and Tony Stark. They were very afraid of the EC before. Although the scene of Loki invading the Earth with a large army was short, it was deeply imprinted in their hearts. But now it's good. Knowing that the EC may perish in a few years, the big stone in their hearts has finally been put down. Jarvis, how is this Ragnarok described in mythology? Tony Stark said. Jarvis quickly showed everyone the information he could find about Asgard's Ragnarok. The process is complicated, but in general, it is the end of the reign of the gods. Many giants, including fire giants and frost giants, began to rebel against the gods. The imprisoned Loki also broke free and took his children to seek revenge on Asgard. In the end, the world was broken apart and only a very small number of gods and humans survived the war and re-established a new order. Black Widow Natasha finished reading it and summarized. Tony, what do you want to say? Tony Stark paused, then said, in this final ending, only a very small number of gods and humans survived the war and re-established a new order. Does it look like the description in Lin Feng's diary that Asgard was wiped out, and then Thor ascended the throne as king in a fishing village in northern Europe? Although they are not completely consistent, there is one thing in common, that is, Asgard must be destroyed. Among the many giants mentioned in this story, we have already seen the frost giants. The relationship between Loki and Odin's family is not the same as in the mythology, but this is not the point. The point is that, if the mythology is a reflection of part of the facts, combined with what is mentioned in Lin Feng's diary, I'm afraid that, even if the gods of Asgard win in the end, it will be a miserable victory, and they will no longer be able to rule the 9 realms. Then there is a question, what frost giants, fire giants, dark elves, or other races of the 9 realms mentioned in the mythology, will they want to rule the earth? By that time, we may not be facing the army of Asgard. I don't know why Odin didn't choose to rule the earth and let it go, but there is no doubt that this is the best result for the earth. If the rulers of the 9 realms are replaced, they may not be so merciful. In other words, the Ragnarok of Asgard and the replacement of the rulers of the 9 realms may not be a good thing for us. Tony Stark finished his analysis, and everyone took a breath. Before, they almost all regarded Asgard as a potential enemy, but if a new ruler was replaced, it might be much more brutal than Asgard's rule. Although the specific reason is unknown, Odin is satisfied with the current scope and mode of rule, which is known, and the next ruler of the 9 realms is unknown. If it is the mode of their American ancestors invading North America, then mankind is doomed. Everyone heard the words, and felt cold all over. If this is true, the earth is really in danger. If this is true, we can only fight to the death. Hawkeye Barton said in Self-Abandonment. Chapter 83, Shocking Explosion of Snake Shield. This seems to be a statement of determination, but it is also a kind of determination. Because they have no other choice. If there is such a day, they can only choose to die on the battlefield. They are all arrogant people. It is impossible for them to kneel down and surrender, and then lead the way for the alien monarch. But now they understand that they used to look forward to the decline of Asgard every day, so that they could survive, but now think that Asgard maintaining its current state may be the best choice for them. But now Asgard can no longer maintain its current state, and can no longer serve as their de facto umbrella. Odin will die in a few years, and the so-called Ragnarok, although it is unknown how long it will take, it always feels that it will not be long before Odin's death. So in fact, it means that the chaos in the 9 realms is just a matter of a few years, and the pressure on everyone's heart is getting heavier. Especially now they know too little. Even if they want to prepare in advance, what's the use? Do they know where Asgard is? Do they know where the frost giants and fire giants are? Even if we know, we can't wipe out the root of the problem. It's possible that the earth will be destroyed first. At present, people don't know how deep the water on earth is. In their eyes, the earth is really in danger. A group of skinny monkeys haven't flown out of the universe yet, but the known powerful aliens, the dimensional lords, are already a lot of terrible enemies. This world really has a bleak future. However, there is nothing to worry about from Asgard. Odin won't live for many years anyway, and Loki makes trouble every day. Even if he is alive, he has to find a way to clean up his son's ass and solve various problems. TSK, this is only the first stage of the Marvel Universe. When the second stage starts, it will be a riot of demons. The real trouble is SHIELD. Today's battle is likely to attract the attention of Fuckman. He is such a petty and black-bellied egghead. It would be strange if he didn't care when he saw my uncontrollable combat power. But if it's just that, it's fine. I'm afraid it will attract the attention of the shield. If the shield really notices it, it will be endless trouble. Otherwise, kill their leader in advance. But this will cause great damage to the timeline. If TVA doesn't come to me, Ancient One will also come to me. Who knows if these changes will affect her retirement plan. This woman is still one of the strongest bosses in the universe at this stage. The Hulk is so awesome, but he slapped Bruce Banner's soul out with a slap, like a dead dog. No, it's still too dangerous. Seeing this part of the diary that emerged, Nick Fury's face became even uglier, and everyone couldn't help laughing. Fuck Fury, ha 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 ha, it's really funny, Nick Fury, otherwise you can use this nickname. Tony Stark laughed and said, or use the Eggman, is that okay? Tony, your joke is not funny at all, Nick Fury said with a dark face. He didn't know how he had offended Lin Feng. Why did he give himself two such ugly nicknames right away? But Lin Feng's understanding of him was indeed correct, and he really understood his character completely. Faced with uncontrollable combat power, he would indeed want to use it for his own use, or eliminate it in advance. It is absolutely impossible to let it go. It has even reached a level of mild persecution delusion. However, what he wrote afterwards completely caught his attention. He was still very clear about who Hulk was. At present, the evaluation of Hulk in S.H.I.E.L.D. is still like a prehistoric beast. In short, it is a bit outrageous. At present, all the weapons known to mankind have been tried. After all, he has been hunted by the regular US Army before. Except for the weapons with an outrageous range of destruction, ordinary weapons have basically been used. The US Army at this time can still be said. You can say that he is bad, but you can't say that he is incompetent, especially since the ones hunting down Hulk are the elite among the elite. However, he was basically hung up and hammered by Hulk, but it was useless. The more he was hit, the angrier he became, and the angrier he became, the more violent he became, and the more violent he became, the stronger his destructive power became. It was such an unsolvable existence. He didn't know whether he could use a nuclear bomb to deal with it, and no one could afford the consequences of releasing a nuclear bomb. Although all countries have developed tactical nuclear weapons, no one has actually used them. This is a Pandora's box. Once opened, there is no way to close it. However, when such a person faced the Supreme Sorcerer Ancient One, he was slapped out of Bruce Banner's soul with a slap. What kind of scene was that? It was almost unimaginable. But there is no doubt that it must be very terrible. This method of beating out the soul must be a method of the magic side, which is unimaginable for their scientific side. But this also explains why Lin Feng, who now has such strength and a body that is almost invulnerable to guns and cannons, is still so afraid of Ancient One. If it were him, he would also be afraid. There is no need to say more. Just listening to the description has given him goosebumps. The rest of the people had similar opinions. Tony Stark thought about it and said, what exactly is this TVA? Why would it interfere? Is there really someone who can maintain this entire timeline? This statement was enough to make everyone gasp. Every time Lin Feng mentioned TVA, they would unconsciously be extremely wary of the existence of an organization like TVA. But what is this snake shield? Why does it sound so similar to our shield? Hill asked. Why do I feel that Lin Feng seems to be afraid of being noticed by the snake shield? Yes, this snake shield. Why does it feel like some kind of nickname? Otherwise, how come we haven't heard of it at all? Black Widow Natasha made a judgment and said. Nick Fury and others nodded. Indeed, with the huge power of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the other world, there is no way to hide it from them. Well, there are a few. There are also some. There are also many. Another organization that I've never heard of has emerged. Now I feel like we are really frogs in a well. We know nothing, yet we still think we know everything. Hawkeye Barton couldn't help but complain. Chapter 84, SHIELD infiltrates S.H.I.E.L.D. Facing Hawkeye Barton's self-mockery, everyone wanted to refute, but there was no way to refute. I see here that, although Lin Feng is afraid of the shield, he is not afraid of the Ancient One, Odin of Asgard, or Dormammu, but similar to the fear of Kingpin, afraid that Kingpin will threaten his family. Tony Stark said. So far, we know that his fear is generally divided into two types. One is the fear of the Ancient One, Odin, Dormammu, and the Purple Potato Spirit, who are not as strong as him. The second is the fear of Kingpin, who will bring a lot of trouble to his family. Nick Fury, you are also in the second type of people he is afraid of, but he probably thinks you are not a black-hearted person, so he didn't think of killing you. Now the shield is also the second type of situation. Nick Fury touched his bald head and felt a little palpitated. Indeed, Lin Feng mentioned this matter, but he didn't take it to heart at the time. After all, he offended a lot of people in his position, and one more person who wanted to kill him was nothing. But later, as Lin Feng's strength increased, he suddenly found that Lin Feng seemed to have the strength to kill him at will. At least from his performance in the last battle against the destroyer armor. Even if it was not as outrageous as a Hulk, it was already considered a non-human situation. So what do you want to say? Hawkeye Barton asked. What I want to say is that since it is not what Lin Feng is afraid of, it is likely that they do not have very strong military force. So I think this organization is similar to your shield. So Lin Feng can kill its leader and eradicate it from the source, but he is still worried that this drastic change will cause changes in the timeline, leading to the emergence of Ancient One or that TVA. Tony Stark continued to talk. What does this mean? It means that this shield bureau must be related to many major events in the future. Lin Feng did not show any mercy when killing ordinary criminals. It means that the existence or non-existence of these people will not have a big impact on the timeline. However, some people are different. For example, Kingpin. Lin Feng has some concerns about killing him directly, and this shield bureau is probably a much more powerful organization than Kingpin. Therefore, Lin Feng has deeper concerns about wiping them out and changing the historical timeline. Doesn't this prove that there is indeed some kind of organization maintaining our timeline, and they may easily find loopholes in some timelines? For example, if we read history books and suddenly find that Washington is gone, what will happen? Hill said. We will find that the Indians are saved. Nick Fury told a cold joke, and then he found that he was the only black person present, and the others were all white. This joke was really cold. However, Hill's words also made everyone understand that if there really is such an organization, then they may be looking up from the downstream of the timeline. Everything that happened upstream will be recorded, and the difference between the recorded and the recorded is probably where the history went wrong. For example, if they were to establish such an organization now, and if they found out that Washington was missing, what would be the consequences? Maybe the United States was also gone. Then they would definitely correct this history as soon as possible, if they had the ability to do so. After all, they were all their ancestors. If they were really gone, their existence would disappear along with them. Judging from oneself, you can know how terrible this organization that guarantees time is. Lin Feng couldn't help but be afraid. But the strange thing is the connection between the two. Why would it be noticed by S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Snake Shield as well? Is there really such an organization in the dark that is no less powerful than us? Black Widow Natasha said, a little puzzled. Although it's hard to believe, if we assume that Lin Feng didn't lie about this matter, then I'm afraid there really is such an organization. Nick Fury said, feeling a little frightened. There is such a powerful organization. If our shield can notice it, it means that the Snake Shield has also noticed it. Such a huge organization must have existed for a long time, and all kinds of human resources, and relationships cannot be organized in a short period of time. And they have been handling various cases around the world for so many years, but they have not found any clues. This is unreasonable. The only reasonable explanation is that they are like those magicians. They have known the existence of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a long time, but they have special ways to avoid S.H.I.E.L.D. surveillance. In this case, S.H.I.E.L.D. is in the open, and they are in the dark. In this case, if the S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to attack S.H.I.E.L.D., they have almost no ability to fight back. A person who attacks in the dark is the most terrifying. No matter which one, we must be careful of this S.H.I.E.L.D., and we don't know who is the enemy. We don't know what the camp of this S.H.I.E.L.D. is. Nick Fury said. This S.H.I.E.L.D. must not be a good person. Tony Stark said. The reason is very simple. Lin Feng's concern about the Snake Shield Bureau is very obvious, but the strength of the Snake Shield Bureau is obviously not enough for him to take seriously. However, he is so afraid of the Snake Shield Bureau. There is only one possibility, that is, it may harm his family. Although Lin Feng is from another universe, he is not a heartless person. He seems to have accepted this relationship. So from this perspective, in Lin Feng's eyes, the Snake Shield Bureau may attack his family. What kind of good people can they be? If Lin Feng was not afraid of causing drastic changes in the timeline, he would have personally taken action. to produce the head of the Snake Shield Bureau. This means that Lin Feng knows their origins, their strengths, and their style of doing things, but it is just not convenient to do it. Everyone nodded. Indeed, they had discussed it before. In fact, from Lin Feng's attitude towards various forces, it can be roughly judged whether it is the lawful, kind, and just, or the evil, chaotic, and disorderly camp. One guess is right, and one guess is silent. Do you think it is possible that this force has already infiltrated our bureau? Hawkeye Barton suddenly said with a sudden thought. How could we not find any clues at all in all these years? They are not like those wizards who have all kinds of magical methods and seem to be as good as us. How did they manage to leave no trace? Chapter 85. The resentment of the workers is heavier than that of the evil swordsman. What is creepy? This is creepy. Hawkeye Barton said something that made everyone's hair stand on end. Is this possible? Yes, and it is very possible. I think the establishment time of this Snake Shield may be even longer than ours. If it is an organization that was just established in the last 20 or 30 years, we can't know nothing about it. Nick Fury said. Jarvis, from now on, search all the information related to Snake Shield on the internet, even if it is rumors, or ordinary people's chats. If there is any news, notify me immediately. Tony Stark said. Okay, sir. Jarvis replied. If we consider that there are undercovers from the Snake Shield in our organization, then we can't be too loud in looking for the Snake Shield. However, judging from Lin Feng's tone, since the Snake Shield is so important, it must be directly related to many major events in the future. In other words, they will come out to make trouble sooner or later, and we will catch their little braids sooner or later, said Black Widow Natasha. Well, this is the only way now. Nick Fury thought about it. He really didn't know what other way there was. In the Asgard palace, Thor looked at his father and asked, Father, do you know what this TVA is? I haven't heard of it. Odin said directly and decisively. He knew both Dormammu and Ancient One mentioned in the diary very well, but he had never heard of this TVA. This is the most troublesome part. If there really is such an organization that maintains the so-called stability of the timeline and does not make mistakes, then is it possible for them to control themselves? This is difficult to say because the current strength of TVA is unknown. He thought of more terrible possibilities. For example, is his death destined? For example, is the demise of Asgard destined? Is it destined that his son will become a star of fate? If not, why can Lin Feng predict all this so confidently? This is not impossible. Thinking of this, Odin's face remained calm, and his heart became nervous. He was a great god king, and everything he had was not arranged by others? That would be too miserable. When Lin Feng thought of the Ancient One's methods, he immediately felt horrified, because he was not completely sure yet. Is this a movie world, a comic world, or a comprehensive world of movies and comics? American comics. The strength of the Ancient One in the movie is already very strong, but in fact it only shows the tip of the iceberg of the Ancient One's strength. The Ancient One in the comics is even more outrageous. He can be called the king of freeloaders. It vividly interprets what it means to borrow magic power by my own ability. Why should I pay it back? To be honest, Lin Feng did not want to affect the development of major events on the magic side because it was really outrageous. It was a crisis of universe destruction at any time, similar to the invasion of Dormammu. In front of the major events created by Doctor Strange, that was nothing. What are the major events on the technology side? The Avengers? Alien invasion? Hydra surfaced? What the hell is that? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but continue writing. Not knowing magic is still a huge weakness after all. Should I go to Kamataj and then worship the Ancient One? After thinking about it, I decided not to do it. This big guy uses a time stone to observe the timeline whenever he has something to do. If he sees me, a heretic who is not on the original timeline, will he kill me directly? It's hard to say. After all, anyone who prevents her from getting off work will not have a good end. A person who has worked for hundreds of years may have more resentment than the evil sword immortal. Moreover, magic in the Marvel universe is not easy to learn. All magic power must be repaid. How you use it in life, you have to pay it back after death. You fight to protect the peace of the universe in life, and you have to work for those demons to pay off your debts after death. If it were me, I couldn't stand it. It's impossible to work, not even a day's work. But you can also learn from the Ancient One. I borrowed magic power with my own ability, why should I pay it back? Manual Doghead, of course, you have to be prepared to be hunted down by these demons. The demons killed by the Ancient One in these years are probably enough to circle the solar system. Among them, are there any ancients who want to kill the creditors and not pay back the money? We don't know, and we dare not ask. Anyway, there are not many people who dare to come to him to pay back their debts. A dead creditor is a good creditor. Seeing that the diary was still being updated, everyone was still teasing. Lin Feng was in a good mood today. It was rare for him to write more. But then they saw this content and immediately took a breath. The content here was simply explosive. Kamataj. So the place where the wizards live is called Kamataj. Tony Stark narrowed his eyes and said immediately, Jarvis, search the internet immediately to see if there is any information related to Kamataj. After a moment, Jarvis had already given the answer. At the foot of the Himalayas in South Asia, there is a legend among the locals that mentions the word Kamataj. There is not enough information that can be searched on the internet, but according to the information, there has been news about Kamataj for hundreds of years. The locals believe that it is the residence of the gods. Jarvis replied, it matches, and it has magic power, so the locals think it is a god. And since the place is near the Himalayas, there should be a large number of Chinese people active there. So in the previous video, the Asian man was called Wang, which matches, and their clothing style is also like the style of the ascetics in South Asia, and even the name Ancient One is like a Chinese name. Tony Stark clapped his hands, and now a lot of the previous information also matches. This Kamataj is a magic organization from Southeast Asia and South Asia. It should be full of South Asians and Chinese people. Now it is diversified. There are also blacks and whites. In general, this can explain a previous problem, that is, why they had never heard of such a wizard organization before. In addition to the fact that these wizards themselves have mysterious means, it is also because their location is too remote. As for the area where South Asia, Southeast Asia and China meet, it is indeed very closed and backward, and is even considered by some people to be the happiest place in the world. Ordinary people may have little access to the internet, making this one of the poorest regions on the planet. Chapter 86 Ancient One. Why should I return the magic power that I borrowed with my own ability? They have extraordinary abilities, and they live in such a remote place, so no one knows about their existence all year round. Shield is distributed all over the world, but it is basically linked to the economy. Basically, the more developed the country and region, the more people they have, and in the remote areas with underdeveloped economy, they basically don't have many people. At the junction of various regions, where Kamataj is located, it is basically a no man's land, and there is nothing to monitor there. But who would have thought that there was a prehistoric giant crocodile lurking there? And those mages have the means of teleportation. Even if they live in the mountains, they will return to the city in the next second. So living in a remote place is actually beneficial for them to practice away from ordinary people. But it's useless to know. They don't dare to contact, and they are more afraid of affecting the plot. To be precise, it is Lin Feng's attitude that affects their attitude. Lin Feng's fear of changing the timeline also deeply affects them. But then their eyes fell on the time gem observing the timeline. The case has been solved. No wonder Lin Feng is so afraid to come forward. It seems that, if he does something, he will be attacked by the Ancient One. So that's the case. The time stone can actually observe the timeline? This is too scary. Hawkeye Barton said in shock. At this time, everyone nodded. They finally understood why Lin Feng always said that he was afraid of the Ancient One's interference. Obviously, the Ancient One did have the ability to interfere, and he also had a way to discover it. Because he can check the timeline at any time, so who is not on the original destiny trajectory, he knows it clearly. This time stone, this magic side's means. Tony Stark had to admit that the scientific side was still far behind in this regard, too immature. But Ancient One can't monitor the whole universe and the whole world by herself. After all, Her brain is still human, and it can't become a supercomputer. It's impossible to monitor everyone. So Lin Feng thought in his diary that, as long as he stayed away from Doctor Strange Stephen Strange, he would not be noticed by Ancient One. I think that should be the case. Everyone nodded and agreed with this judgment. They were all shocked by the fact that Ancient One could observe the future timeline through the time stone. But they thought about it again. Even if you can monitor the future timeline, you can't monitor everyone. There must be a focus. Just like we speculated before, the universe where Lin Feng was originally located may be of a higher dimension, and he can see the so-called Marvel Universe and DC Universe, but they can't be familiar with everyone. At most, they can only know some people who are called protagonists or supporting roles by Lin Feng. They can monitor them. They can't pay attention to others. Nick Fury added immediately. He was very confident about this because of the people he sent to Lin Feng's company before. Only Sharon Carter and Black Widow Natasha were recognized by Lin Feng, and the others were not recognized at all. This shows that Lin Feng's so-called omniscience is not really knowing everything. By the same token, even the universe where Lin Feng is located in a higher dimension cannot monitor everyone, so there is no reason for Ancient One to do so. Even if he has the ability, there is no need. Just like when humans observe an ant nest, the focus is of course on the queen ant. Does it mean that a camera should be arranged to follow the direction of each ant? This is ridiculous. After hearing this, several people in the middle breathed a sigh of relief, and the terrible sense of oppression also dissipated a lot. At least as long as they don't provoke Doctor Strange Stephen Strange, they should not cause Ancient One to suppress them. And Lin Feng also mentioned many times in his diary that Ancient One wanted to find a successor and then go off work. She has worked for hundreds of years without rest. If it were them, they would also be full of resentment. Anyone who might prevent her from going off work must die, which is terrible. But is magic so unsafe? I thought the magic power to cast magic came from the power of heaven and earth or something, but I didn't expect it to come from many demons. Hill said. Yes. Humans are just ordinary creatures after all. How can they exert such bizarre power? These demons lend their power to magicians. Why do they feel like they have bad intentions? Black Widow Natasha said. Everyone nodded. This story template is too much like the legendary demons who induce ordinary people to sign certain contracts and then tamper with the contracts. They have to pay their souls to get a little bit from the demons. This is terrible. It sounds very tragic to protect the earth during life, but to work for the demons they fought against during life, to pay off their debts after death. At this time, they suddenly felt a little sympathetic to the magicians, and it didn't seem so enviable. Only Tony Stark felt something was wrong. Why did this sound so much like a template for capitalists exploiting the working people? Ordinary people work hard to produce products for capitalists, and then earn that meager salary, and have to buy the products produced by capitalists, and finally complete a closed loop. After working for a lifetime, many people still have nothing. Where is the money? The money was exploited by the capitalists. But he didn't say much, because he noticed what Lin Feng mentioned later, the mode of Ancient One. I borrowed the magic power with my own ability, why should I pay it back? This old debtor's style almost surprised everyone, and the image of the otherworldly master in their hearts was instantly destroyed. So the Ancient One mentioned by the black magician before also absorbed the energy of the dark dimension. It was probably what Lin Feng said about the magician asking those demons to borrow power. He thought that the Ancient One might be eroded by the dark power, and might become a minion of the dark dimension Lord Dormammu, because he borrowed too much. But he probably didn't expect that the Ancient One didn't intend to pay it back at all. This description by Lin Feng. I borrowed it with my own ability, why should I pay it back? It's really too appropriate. Black Widow Natasha didn't know what words to use to describe this situation for a while. There is no doubt that it was outrageous, and it directly collapsed the image of Ancient One as a hermit. But it was unexpectedly cool. If the Ancient One later relied on absorbing the energy of the dark dimension to maintain the incorruptibility of her body and gain powerful strength, then whose power did she absorb before? Whose power did those magicians absorb when they practiced magic? Nick Fury raised his doubts. Chapter 87, Sorcerer Supreme Tony Stark. That is to say, if according to what Lin Feng said, the magicians absorb the power of the demon gods, then these magicians should also absorb the power of one or more demon gods in normal times, and the power of these demon gods is considered to have no side effects, or we can think that this is the justice and lawful camp. Nick Fury thought for a while and said, there is still too little information at present, but this is indeed the most likely speculation. But what Lin Feng said is also very interesting. This ancient one is indeed powerful. He can only absorb the power of those demon gods, but not return it. This shows that these demon gods may not be as powerful as we imagine, or at least they have no way to come to Earth to settle accounts with Ancient One. Black Widow Natasha said, after all, the demon gods killed by Ancient One may not be able to circle the solar system. I don't know if this is the solar system in a broad sense or a narrow sense. It seems that there are still creditors of Ancient One in it. Lin Feng wrote in a very playful way in his diary, as if all this happened easily. But in fact, just thinking about the specific situation is enough to make their scalps numb. For example, how did these demons come to Earth to collect debts? How did they invade Earth and finally be killed by Ancient One? That must have involved a series of unimaginable horrific wars. Hidden behind a joke in Lin Feng's diary is Ancient One's horrifying fighting power. They haven't seen many of those demons, and they don't know much. They only know that Dormammu, the Lord of the Dark Dimension, almost ate the Earth, and Ancient One used to fight with such beings, and even killed such beings. Looking at it this way, Lin Feng's fear is undoubtedly not exaggerated at all. In the palace of Asgard, Thor looked at his father Odin and asked, is this Ancient One really so powerful? Of course, she is one of the most terrifying beings among humans I have ever seen. Odin nodded and replied, the strength of Ancient One alone is not inferior to his. If they really fight, he is the only one who can take advantage, not to mention the Navashandi standing behind all the white magicians. The three demons are definitely not inferior to Ancient One in terms of strength, and are even stronger. There are even other hidden giant crocodiles on Earth, so he only completed his claim to the Earth in name, and never dared to do anything to the Earth from beginning to end. The more you know, the more afraid you are. The less you know, the more daring you are. Including in the diary video, Loki invaded the Earth in the name of revenge for Thor, the god of thunder, and he frowned. He didn't know how ambitious Loki was, but he had to figure out how much he had. Other places are easy to say. Although the Earth is really remote, and seems to be a rural place, it is the birthplace of many big men. According to the ancient books of Asgard, many demons lived on the Earth in the distant past. Later, a great war broke out, and many demons were defeated and expelled from the main universe. One of them was Dormammu, the Lord of the Dark Dimension. This is just one of them, not to mention that there are other demons eyeing this, and the demon who won in the end is even more terrifying. In addition, there are also many gods from various pantheons that were expelled from the Earth. For example, the gods of the Greek pantheon are all staying in the pantheon of the Almighty City. They seem to have no ambitions, but who knows if they are still ambitiously eyeing the Earth. Just the big guys he already knows, who are eyeing the Earth, are so many that it makes people's scalps numb, and each of them is a terrifying existence in the universe. Thor remembered that his father rarely allowed them to go to the Earth freely in the past, and he was also very secretive about the affairs of the Earth. Among them, the Ancient One was a big man that he personally told not to provoke. He seemed to understand, now that it was indeed an existence, that he could not afford to provoke, and it was very scary. As for creatures like demons, he also knew that the worst ones had to be about the same level as him, and many of them were in different dimensions. He didn't know whether Lin Feng's statement that the demon killed by the Ancient One could circle the solar system was an exaggeration or a true story, but it was enough for him to judge that the Ancient One was an existence that he could not afford to provoke. He was still too young and had no idea how deep the water in this universe was. He also suspected that his father was old and timid. It was really ridiculous. In the future, you should avoid provoking those wizards. Even after the Ancient One dies, you must be very careful. Do you understand? Odin said. The wizards in Kamatage are definitely not simple. It's not just that there is only the Ancient One on the surface. You just need to understand some things. I remember. Thor said very seriously. Speaking of which, it seems that many people have served as a supreme sorcerer. In addition to the normal version of Doctor Strange Stephen Strange, the most interesting one is probably the Tony Stark version of the Supreme Sorcerer. Tony Stark himself probably didn't expect that in addition to becoming Iron Man, he also has a talent for magic, and there is a very small probability that he will become the Supreme Sorcerer Tony Stark. And Captain America seems to have become the Supreme Sorcerer for a period of time, because his soul and the soul of Doctor Strange Stephen Strange share a body. Loki has also been the Supreme Sorcerer. Do you dare to believe it? Manil Doghead, this Supreme Sorcerer is almost becoming a special position for villains to whitewash, which is also outrageous. Seeing that he was mentioned, Tony Stark was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect it to be like this. It turned out that in some timelines, he actually had the possibility of becoming the Supreme Sorcerer, or in other words, he actually had a talent for magic in addition to scientific research. And it was the top talent that could become the Supreme Sorcerer. After the initial astonishment, Tony Stark couldn't help but nodded. It's okay. A super invincible genius like me has unimaginable talents in all aspects. It's reasonable, right? Very reasonable. I'm indeed a super genius. Tony Stark's narcissism has reached a new level. This is a talent officially certified by Lin Feng. Then Tony, do you want to find a way to learn magic? Nick Fury knew that Tony Stark was narcissistic again when he saw his look. Tony Stark paused and said, if necessary, it's not impossible. Although he was also shocked by what Lin Feng said in his diary, if he learned magic and used the magic power of those demon gods, he would have to work for them after he died and become a tool man, and his end would be miserable. But if you really have no choice and encounter a strong enemy that you cannot defeat, this is also a solution. It will be available the day after tomorrow, and it will be here soon. Please support it. Chapter 88. As we all know, Gu Yi died because of the high cost of special effects. At worst, you can just learn from Ancient One. Why should you pay back the magic power you borrowed with your own ability? If you have the guts, come to Earth and bite me. Unconsciously, Tony Stark was also influenced by Lin Feng and had this idea of getting something for free. Thor and Odin just thought it was ridiculous. Loki could actually become the Sorcerer Supreme in some timelines. Is there anything more outrageous than this? They even had a feeling that the position of the Sorcerer Supreme could be held by a dog. But fortunately, it's not been a few years, and Ancient One should have died. Just say that you charge so much for special effects every time you appear, it's hard for you not to die. After all, it is well known that the Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One died because of the expensive special effects, and Tony Stark died because of the expensive pay. Manil Doghead, everyone was confused. What does it mean? What does it mean that the Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One died because of the expensive special effects? And what Tony Stark found even more ridiculous was that how could he die because of the expensive pay? Although if those big Hollywood companies wanted to invite him to make a movie, the salary would definitely be very expensive. After all, the little income from making a movie was not a drop in the bucket for him, but he was unwilling to work so hard to earn such a little money. But it was a bit too outrageous to die, just because his salary was expensive. Could this cause of death be more outrageous? How come Lin Feng started to talk nonsense? With this special effect fee, if Ancient One doesn't die, the funds will not be enough. Manil Doghead, with the appearance of a title, everyone saw a video. They clicked in one after another. In a dark ancient courtyard, a group of people wearing South Asian style training clothes walked in. Everyone looked closely and found that these people looked familiar. Suddenly, they reacted. Aren't these the followers of the Dark Dimension Lord Dormammu in the previous Doctor Strange video? The screen switched, and a wizard locked one of the books, and then was surrounded by these people. He was instantly lifted up by the magic whip, and then his head was cut off. Then the book, that was locked with chains, was taken down. The leader was Cassilis. He flipped through the part of the magic book about how to sacrifice to the Dark Dimensional Lord Dormammu, tore it off, and then threw the rest away. But when he was about to leave, he saw someone next to him speak. Master Cassilis, that ritual will only harm you. Hearing this, Cassilis almost immediately prepared to cast a spell to escape. He knew very well that he could not be the opponent of the Supreme Sorcerer Ancient One. Then a scene that shocked everyone happened. Just by pushing open the door, they were in the ancient South Asian courtyard just now, and immediately transformed into the metropolis of New York. Teleportation array. Everyone immediately had this concept in their minds, and at the same time, they couldn't help but feel a little envious in their hearts. No matter how many times they saw it, they still felt that it was too convenient. But they had just escaped halfway when they suddenly found that the space in front of them was shattered piece by piece, and they had entered the mirror space of the Supreme Sorcerer Ancient One. Then a more magical scene happened. With the spell cast by the Supreme Mage Ancient One, the whole city began to rotate like a spinning toy. The ground turned into a wall, and the wall turned into a flat ground. Hypocrite! Caecilius roared, and both sides jumped onto the wall of the house. With the spell cast by Ancient One, the wall of the house seemed to be a layer of waves sweeping towards Caecilius and other followers of Dormammu. And these mages also attacked him one after another, and then deliberately showed their terrifying strength. Their battle was carried out on the wall. Those villain mages would be swallowed up and killed by the rotating house if they were accidentally knocked down. The whole action was neat, simple and direct. Even if the opponent was outnumbered, they were still no match for the Ancient One. Just a wall flip almost wiped out all the mages. At the critical moment, Caecilius quickly used the hanging ring to create an exit, and he and his followers quickly escaped from this exit. This saved the fate of being killed. Facing Caecilius and others who were no longer able to catch up, the Ancient One did not continue to chase them, but instead created a teleportation array and left, not caring about the corpses she had killed in the mirror space. Then everyone saw her walking on the road in a modified monk's robe, and after taking off her hood, she revealed a bald head. The scene ended here, just a very brief battle scene, but everyone had a sense of amazement. The battle between the mages made them feel so magical. So in that mysterious space, the building turned over, and there was no one inside. I think it might be a spell, Hill said. This explains why our surveillance system has been all over the world for so many years, but we have never found any traces of these mages. This is not what we thought before. They can use time spells to repair the fluctuations caused by previous battles. This is our misunderstanding. Nick Fury nodded and continued. We thought before that every wizard could cast a time spell, but now we know that our previous inference might be wrong. The only one who can cast a time spell is the owner of the time stone, that is, the Sorcerer Supreme. I think the time stone should be owned by a leader among wizards like the Sorcerer Supreme. Now the current Sorcerer Supreme is the Ancient One, so Lin Feng said that she used the time stone to observe the future. But the Sorcerer Supreme in the future should be Doctor Stephen Strange for at least a period of time. So during that period of time, he held the time stone, and then I don't know what happened. The time stone may have been lost, or it may have been directly broken. So Doctor Stephen Strange no longer had the time stone to use. So when helping Peter Parker, he needed to use that dangerous spell. So the way they, including the wizards who are Dormammu's followers, are able to avoid being monitored by the secular government should be that space, or some kind of universal spell, where they can easily twist buildings and change battlefield terrain without even being perceived by ordinary people. It doesn't matter if there are some corpses inside that have not been dealt with. From a scientific point of view, it could be some other dimension, plane, or parallel space, Nick Fury said with some uncertainty. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89. Voldemort had to offer Iron Man a cigarette when he saw him. It's really amazing. Shouldn't wizards ride on brooms and shout Avada, eat big melons? Tony Stark complained. This is not the same battle as I imagined. I thought it would be an Expelliarmus, and then the 3 unforgivable curses. Hearing this, Natasha, the Black Widow, glanced at Tony Stark and said, Tony, if you were born in the wizard world, Voldemort would give you a cigarette and call you Big Brother when he saw you. Tony Stark shrugged, but everyone couldn't help laughing. But you have to admit that this scene is really cool. Even I have to admit that it is a little cooler than my armor, just a little bit. No wonder Lin Feng said that the special effects cost is expensive. If this is made into a movie, the special effects cost will not be cheap. The cost is burning every second. Tony Stark continued. Of course, it's just a small amount of money for me. If necessary, I can support her in every battle. It's just a waste of money, no big deal. Facing Tony Stark's heroic speech, everyone couldn't help but roll their eyes. The evil capitalist. But even so, I still feel that the strength of this ancient one is far from as terrible as mentioned in Lin Feng's diary, and I don't understand what he is afraid of. She can certainly defeat all these mages by herself. It looks very strong, but it's still not enough. In my imagination, a farther level existence should be able to catch them all with one hand, but now those mages seem to be very stupid. They only know how to escape, and the only counterattack seems to be delaying time to prepare for more people to escape. Ancient One has not shown the kind of terrifying fighting power. Tony Stark continued. Did Lin Feng misunderstand? Or is he not clear at all? The performance of those mages can actually be explained, because they are not the opponent of Ancient One at all, so they dare not compete with him. It's like the same army. When they are fleeing and fighting, they may behave very differently. Once they are fleeing, they may perform worse than pigs. Nick Fury said. And we can't underestimate these people. Didn't we just experience it today? The destroyer armor that looked so in the diary video, and was even easily dealt with by Thor. I think everyone should know how difficult it would be for us to fight. Tony Stark immediately remembered that his armor was almost blown up today. The destroyer armor that looked ordinary, if only judging from the performance in the diary video, was strong, but it was still dealable. As a result, he personally took action, and was beaten up in a few moves. If Lin Feng hadn't come out to hold the opponent back, they would have had difficulty in retreating. From this perspective, these mages seemed to be nothing on the surface, but it was hard to say how strong they were in a real fight. Even last time, Odin, who was classified as the father of heaven by Lin Feng, and Hela, the goddess of death, did not seem to show the level we imagined. Only Dormammu showed his terrifying power. But since Lin Feng divided it this way, there must be a reason for it. Behind him is not a person, but a high-dimensional civilization that can observe other universes. This division system is definitely not an ordinary person like Lin Feng in his previous life. It may be a division made by their government in their previous life. I think there should be a reason, but we don't know it yet. Nick Fury continued to explain. Everyone could only nod their heads. Now looking at it this way, it seems that they can only force themselves to understand it. And don't forget, Ancient One is the one who possesses a time stone and can observe the timeline at any time. Lin Feng is afraid that Ancient One will notice, even if she does something a little out of line, which shows how capable she is. Now this Cassilis brings a group of people to kill people and steal treasures. Do you think Ancient One saw it or not? Black Widow Natasha asked. Nata, what do you mean? Hawkeye Barton was stunned and asked. What I mean is this also part of the plan? Black Widow Natasha said. What we know from Lin Feng's diary is that Ancient One was in a hurry to get off work, and this way of leaving, get off work might end with death. She must have been exhausted both physically and mentally, since she had the time stone, and could observe the future. Could she have seen the temple being breached and Dormammu invading? I think she could. And I wonder what the ritual mentioned by Ancient One was, which was part of the book that Caecilius took. I think it's very likely a ritual to summon, or let Dormammu descend, or a ritual to contact Dormammu. I think there's a connection between the two. The most obvious thing is the bags under Caecilius' eyes. When Dormammu invaded, their bags under their eyes were abnormally black. I think it might be caused by the invasion of dark dimensional energy, which he didn't have in the video just now. So I tend to think that he got a way to contact Dormammu afterwards. Said Natasha, the Black Widow. Does the Ancient One know about this? I think she should know, but this may be the necessary steps to the future she needs. So she has no emotion about Cassilis killing her people and Cassilis escaping. Maybe she has seen this scene countless times in the timeline. It's like watching an old movie. No matter how excited you are the first time, after watching it countless times, it's hard to feel excited again. Maybe you will be numb, right? That explains it. Maybe this is part of the plan. If not, the timeline may point to other directions that she doesn't want to see. In other words, is there a possibility that the timeline can be changed? Tony Stark muttered to himself. From a scientific point of view, from a higher dimension, human birth and death appear at the same time, and there is no possibility of change. So it's not that there is a concept of timeline, and different timelines make life different. Nick Fury said. Each different choice may lead to a different ending. If there is only one result, why should Lin Feng say that Gu did everything he could to ensure that Doctor Strange Stephen Strange became Doctor Strange before she could retire? If it was a destined future, it would definitely happen. Why should she work so hard? It will be available tomorrow, but it should be updated after midnight. Please support the new book. Chapter 90 Ancient One. It's over. I can't see the future anymore. Updated. Please subscribe. Anyway, it's a very convenient ability. Tony Stark said with emotion. These magicians, no matter what ability they have, it's very convenient. Whether it's the portal, time reshaping, or observing the timeline, it's just too convenient. If he had these abilities, wouldn't it be a sure thing in business, and he could get whatever he wanted? Of course, he almost has everything he wants now, but it's still different. It has to be said that with such treasures and such abilities, they didn't come out to cause trouble, which shows that the average level of moral quality of these magicians is still very strong. Oh, no, it's not that they didn't come out to cause trouble. When they make trouble, they want to sacrifice the entire earth to Dormammu. They are really not interested in the indigenous games that dominate the mountains and valleys. This is the promotion brought by a broad vision. Either don't make trouble, or if you do, you will destroy the world at any time. In the palace of Asgard, Thor looked at his father and said, "Father, why do I feel that this ancient one is not as powerful as you said? You and Lin Feng are so afraid of her. Is it really necessary?" Odin glanced at his son, knowing that he was looking down on him, and immediately said, "If you really think so, then sooner or later you will suffer a big loss. How many Godfather level beings do you think there are in the entire universe? How bad can each Godfather level being who can dominate a region be? That is the transformation of the essence of life. No matter which path they take, they are very strong. In other words, let me ask you, what do you think our Asgard relies on to be able to shock the universe? Wherever you go, people have to give you face. Do you think it is your strength? With your strength, can you deal with the millions or tens of millions of troops of those technological civilizations?" Thor was silent. Although he was a very proud person, he was not so arrogant that he went crazy. He now remembered many strange things. For example, Asgard's military strength seemed to be sufficient, but as the commander of Asgard's army, how could he not know it? Why did it seem that many high-level soldiers written in the history books, such as Valkyries, were almost nowhere to be found, and the rest were ordinary troops? The combat power was indeed much stronger than that of ordinary alien races, but the number was too small. But Asgard with such strength could miraculously stand at the top of civilization in many universes. This is very strange in itself, isn't it? There are actually many alien races on Earth. And it's not really unknown in the universe, but no one, including us in Asgard, has taken action. Have you ever thought about the reason? Odin sighed and said. This. Thor was even more silent. If Asgard can still maintain a superficial strength, then the Earth has lost even its superficial strength. Now they still look somewhat civilized, but 1 or 2,000 years ago, they were basically just native monkeys, and they had no deterrent power. You have this idea because you think that in the entire universe, you have been fighting everywhere for many years, but you haven't found many opponents who can fight you. So you think you are already standing at the top of the universe, and even think that the father level is just stronger than you. In fact, that is a big mistake. The power system of the entire universe is not pyramid shaped, but like a needle tip. There are not many masters of your level, and there are not many father level masters, but each of these people can support an entire civilization, regardless of the number. Those armies that can surround and kill you are helpless when they encounter these father level masters. They are not at the same level of life. Odin continued. The strength of the Ancient One that you see now is just the tip of the iceberg, and it may even be the result of her letting it go. You have never seen her resisting the demon gods of other dimensions, so you don't know how powerful she is. Thor nodded quickly, although he still didn't know how powerful these father level masters could be, and Dormammu was just a reference. But he could see how much his old father was afraid that he would make some kind of misjudgment. Anyway, Odin almost hit him on the head with a stick to remind him that the father level should not be provoked. He even wanted to list a list for him so that he would avoid them in the future. But Odin couldn't say that, because if he did that, his eldest son would be useless. Their lineage had to constantly temper the source of divine power in endless battles. If the heart was useless, then the whole person would be useless. So Odin said this after careful consideration, and had to remind him not to act rashly, but at the same time he didn't want to dampen his spirit. In the New York flat, Lin Feng put away the diary and glanced at the bright lights in the city center not far away. At this stage, the city center of the United States has not reached the level of the later stage. No one even dares to walk to the city center at night. You may encounter $0 shopping at any time. After watching for a while, Lin Feng changed his clothes and prepared to go out to do justice. Today, the thermal vision function has just been developed. Shouldn't he try it? When everyone saw that the diary had not been updated for a while, they probably knew that today's diary was over, and everyone dispersed directly. At the same time, in Kamatage, the time gem on the chest of the Ancient One emitted a green glow. She observed the changes in the timeline every day with a calm face. She had seen these timelines many times. Basically, it can be said that there are countless possibilities for the timeline, and each different choice may lead to different consequences. The reason why she was so obsessed with Stephen Strange was because in order to ensure that he could become the supreme sorcerer in the end, there were too many possibilities for future events. There were even timelines where he fell to his death in a car accident and did not survive, or even more bizarre timelines. What she had to do now was to ensure that this would happen. However, since some time ago, she found that some changes had occurred in the future, and when she looked at the future again, it was often obscure. In the past, she could understand the cause and effect of things by just looking at the timeline, but now it was no longer possible. She had gone from completely observing the timeline and even seeing many possibilities to now only vaguely seeing some fragments. This situation has never happened before. Since she obtained the Eye of Agamotto, the time gem, from the previous supreme sorcerer, the timeline has been under her control. Her strength can be improved so quickly, and she can repel and kill so many demons. Naturally, it is also necessary to observe their weaknesses in the timeline. She even knew a long time ago that she would have a disciple in the future, named Stephen Strange. She has been preparing for this day, because in the future she can see her future self will definitely die. No matter how she struggles, or how many methods she uses, it will be the same. Who wants to die for no reason? But fate seems to have played a huge joke on her, letting her know that she will die without a doubt, and she has to accept this fate. But now, fate has changed. This is even more blurred. Gu Yi looked at the fragments on the timeline. She could no longer see the future clearly. She felt that it would become more blurred every day, and her control over the future was getting weaker and weaker. This future is becoming more and more incomprehensible. Days passed by, and 2008 passed without any danger. Soon it was 2009. For a Chinese like Lin Feng, the year was truly over after the Spring Festival. Lin Feng even took time to go to China and return to New York after the Spring Festival. He even went to his family's place in his previous life, but the couple who lived there were strangers. There was no trace of Lin Feng's existence here. Although Lin Feng had expected all this, he was still disappointed when he saw it with his own eyes. This is not a parallel time and space of their original universe, but the Marvel universe. Although it is generally developed according to the template of reality, with the increasing influence of superheroes and supercriminals, it has nothing to do with the real United States. Although Lin Feng's investment company has recruited some talents, since it opened a few months ago, it is still in the process of exploration, and can't make much money. This made Lin Feng sigh that it is indeed a windfall that makes people rich. Fortunately, his main investment method is to hold on to Tony Stark's thigh. With the good news of Tony Stark's new energy research and development progress, the stock price in the market is also soaring. Lin Feng keeps buying, and his wealth has increased a lot compared with before. The rest is to invest in some unicorn companies, which have been proven to be the correct development direction in the previous life, such as cloud computing, artificial intelligence, drones, new energy, etc. Anyway, it is not his own money, so he doesn't feel bad about spending it. Palladium I will also deposit a part of the laundered funds into his account every month, so he basically has no shortage of money. After seeing Lin Feng's strength, Palladium I didn't dare to explode in front of Lin Feng at all. He was well behaved and honest. When Lin Feng lamented that the life of capitalists was so plain and boring, a group of SHIELD agents wearing thick cold-proof clothes gathered together on a glacier in the far north of Russia. With the help of a huge engineering machine, a huge piece of ice was cut down, and a human figure could be vaguely seen in it. The leader, Carlson, was wearing a thick winter suit. When he saw the vague figure inside, his smile was harder than axe. It was really Captain America. In the past few months, they calculated the time and distance according to the direction mentioned in Lin Feng's diary and combined it with the recording at that time. They had a general direction, but even so, when they found the person completely, several months had passed. The first update of the new book, please recommend and vote. Greatly needed. Chapter 91 Good news. Captain America has been dug out. Second update, please subscribe to the monthly ticket. Boss, it's the captain. Although I can't see his face, his uniform is the same as the one on the cards I played with when I was a kid. If there is no second Captain America in the world, it should be him. Carlson turned on the satellite phone and informed Nick Fury. Finally found it. Nick Fury's voice came from the other end of the phone. At this time, Nick Fury was in the warm office of the SHIELD headquarters in New York, looking at the SHIELD base outside the window. Although Lin Feng's diary was used as a guide, it still took several months to complete the final search, because this matter could not be made public, and some of SHIELD's forces could only be mobilized secretly. Because although SHIELD nominally has 5 permanent members behind it, it theoretically has the power to override any organization. But in reality, it can't be seen that way, because the United States has been too strong for many years, especially in the past 30 years. The national strength has been the only one. To put it bluntly, the other few combined are not as rich as the United States. The so-called one who pays is the real father. SHIELD has gradually degenerated from an international organization that maintains world security to a private organization in the United States. The US government is naturally happy, but in contrast, SHIELD's activities in the 5 permanent members countries and spheres of influence are restricted. After all, they are not their own people. Countries are not fools. The branches in the 5 major countries have almost been infiltrated by the countries themselves, which means that the New York headquarters is still the superior organization of the branches of various countries. But in fact, it is not so easy to control the branches of various countries. Even countries have established their own relevant supernatural power processing units, among which the most famous is probably China's SHIELD Bureau. One shield and one shield. The tit for tat meaning is very obvious. If it were not the case, the agents of the Russian branch could be mobilized to do things, and there would be no need to be so sneaky now. But this time, the one looking for is Captain America, such a symbol of the American spirit of freedom. It is hard to guarantee that the Russian authorities will not secretly interfere. For various reasons, it has been delayed until today. Captain America's return would be a huge benefit, not to mention the role of his mental indicators. Captain America's combat power alone is also urgently needed by SHIELD. I don't know if Lin Feng was right. After Tony Stark said, "I'm Iron Man," he clearly felt that the activity of various underground organizations had increased significantly. Various powerful criminals emerged one after another, which made SHIELD a bit of a headache to deal with. It is very important to have one more top combat force. Cut the whole piece of ice and bring it back. Be careful and don't alarm anyone, Nick Fury said. Frightened by what Lin Feng said about the SHIELD, Nick even began to be suspicious, wondering if there were some spies undercover in SHIELD. "I know," Carlson replied, and then ordered people to cut the whole piece of ice and take it to the icebreaker, moored in the distance, ready to return to the United States. A few days later, in a ward, Captain America Steve Rogers, who had been sleeping for an unknown period of time, woke up. He heard the commentary of the baseball game, and he immediately realized that something was wrong. He looked around, and it seemed to be a familiar environment, but everything seemed a little different. Especially the baseball game played on the radio beside him, which reminded him all the time of the weirdness of this room. Then a woman in a US Army uniform came in with a sweet smile on her face. Seeing Captain America, she smiled and said, "Good morning," or "Good afternoon. Where am I?" Captain America Steve Rogers asked. "In a ward in New York," the woman replied. Hearing this, Captain America Rogers was silent for a moment, and then asked, "Where exactly am I?" The red-haired woman was a little panicked, and then hurriedly said, "I don't know what you are talking about." "Baseball game. I know it was in May 1941, because I was there," Captain America said very confidently. Hearing this, the red-haired woman's face immediately changed. "I ask you again, where am I?" Captain America approached step by step, and the red-haired woman was completely panicked and quickly pressed the alarm. At this time, the agents who were ready outside the door broke in. But a moment later, they were knocked down by Captain America Rogers, and were no match at all. Captain America Rogers also rushed out directly, ignoring the words of the red-haired woman, and ran out of the SHIELD headquarters. When he went out, he saw a completely incomprehensible world, full of neon lights and LED lights. It was a completely incomprehensible world. In his impression, New York was already a world-class prosperous metropolis, but compared with what he saw now, it was far different. It was as if he had entered the future world. But a moment later, he was surrounded by a group of agents, led by a black one-eyed man, who stopped Captain America Rogers. "Soldier, at ease. Welcome to the 21st century," Nick Fury said. "I'm sorry to play that trick on you, but we haven't figured out how to explain this fact to you." "What fact?" Captain America Rogers asked. "That is, you have been sleeping for 70 years. Nick Fury put his hands in his pockets and asked. Hearing this, Captain America Rogers looked around in a trance. His eyes were confused. "Captain? Are you okay?" Nick Fury asked a little worriedly. Could it be that he had just recovered from the frozen state and was stupid? Captain America Rogers took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down, then said, "I'm fine. I have another appointment. There will be no chance." Suddenly, he came to 70 years later. Even if Peggy was still alive, she would probably be a white-haired old lady now. For a moment, he was extremely lost. "If it's convenient, come back with us now and have a good chat." "What do you think?" Nick Fury said. "I think if we continue to block traffic here, the traffic police will come to trouble us soon." "Okay, no problem," Captain America Rogers said, and he also noticed that more and more people were gathering around. The habit of watching the excitement was the same everywhere, and he didn't want to be watched like a monkey. Captain America Rogers quickly followed Nick Fury back to the headquarters of SHIELD and came to Nick Fury's office. "Coffee? Or what kind of drink?" Nick Fury asked. "Coffee," Captain America Rogers replied. At this time, he was in no mood to drink a drink. After Nick Fury poured him coffee, he said, "Captain, it has been more than 70 years since the war you experienced, that is, World War II. World War II, more than 70 years, so long?" Captain Rogers said absent-mindedly. Not only did he miss a date, but more importantly, it was obviously a peaceful era. He, a soldier with only killing skills, seemed to be no longer needed. What else could he do? This is also the reason why many veterans are not used to it after retiring. The military career may only last a few years, but it will affect many people for a lifetime. "Then why did you go to so much trouble to find me? Is there anything else I can do?" Captain Rogers asked directly. "Of course. First of all, this is what you should do. You are a hero of this country. No, you are a hero of this world. You saved this world from Hydra and the Nazis." Nick Fury said good words without asking for money. "If we don't know, it's fine. Now that we know, we can't just sit back and watch you. We will save you at all costs." Captain America Rogers did not comment on this. It's okay to lie to others, but he is a serious old American stars and stripes man. How could he not know the nature of the US government? Not long ago in his memory, veterans of World War I were suppressed for asking for wages. It's true that he loves his country, but loving his country and loving the American government are two different things. Not to mention, after he joined the army, he was basically used to seeing all the dark things. He really has great love, is selfless, and is not afraid of sacrifice for the country, but to say that he has never seen anything and doesn't know the faces of politicians is too much of an underestimation of him. It is precisely because he knows the face of the government that he was unwilling to sign the Superhero Registration Act after it came into effect, and even eventually led to the split of the Avengers and formed the West Coast Avengers. After all, the founding spirit of the United States is freedom, and the so-called freedom is based on the confirmation that the US government is a bastard and will never do good things. It must be said that only Americans themselves can understand the US government. And you are not useless. Take a look at this. Seeing that Captain America Rogers was unmoved, Nick Fury did not continue to speak in an official tone, but took out the diary and handed it to Captain America Rogers. This was what he and Black Widow and Hawkeye had discussed. Since they planned to establish the Avengers with Captain America as the core, this secret could not be avoided from him. There are still many unstable places in this world. Believe me, you will definitely not have nothing to do in the future. On the contrary, you will have a lot of work in the future. Nick Fury also poured himself a cup of coffee and took a sip. Captain America Rogers flipped through the diary. At first, he frowned because he couldn't understand it. What was waiting for Tony Stark to be kidnapped? He couldn't understand it at all. Especially what multiverse, what timeline, what parallel time and space. For an old antique like him, it was simply fatal. Chapter 92 What happened to the agent? We still need 007. 3 updates. Please subscribe. Many words in English are made up, especially many professional terms. If you are not a professional, you may not understand them at all, unlike Chinese, which can be understood literally. For Captain America Rogers, who was 70 years behind, he didn't know any of these words. His cultural performance was average. After all, the basic education in the United States, at the civilian level, can only be said to be quite touching. Now he is even more like an illiterate. In the end, he still needs Nick Fury to explain to him before he understands what it means. He doesn't fully understand, but he is shocked. Especially the Spider-Man, Iron Man, the demigod Wonder Woman, the Asgardian Thor, and even the magical things in those videos, such as the invasion of Dormammu, such as the existence of the Supreme Sorcerer Ancient One, almost made his 3 views collapse. On the surface, he was calm, but in fact, his 3 views were completely shattered. He has only been frozen for 70 years. Why does it feel like he has come to 7,000 years later? What kind of monsters are these? So, how can I help? Captain America Rogers said. No matter which one of these, it seems that I can't deal with them. You know, the strongest person I have ever fought is Red Skull, but compared with the people mentioned here, Red Skull is nothing. Captain America Rogers is still very clear about his own strength. None of them can be dealt with by him, not to mention the existence of Dormammu. In his era, even science fiction and magic novels did not have such outrageous villains. Let him fight, he can sacrifice, but what's the use? Of course, because not everyone has such strength. In addition to these existences that we can't deal with, there are many that we can deal with, such as some terrorists, such as some werewolves, vampires and so on. Nick Fury said. What? Werewolves? Vampires? Are you kidding me? Captain America Rogers said in shock. Although his 3 views have been torn apart once just now, it does not prevent him from being torn apart again now. Compared with Dormammu, who had never been heard of before, werewolves and vampires were as well known in the West as God and angels. I'm not kidding you, Captain, these are real. Nick Fury said. I know it may be difficult for you to accept this for a while, but I can send you the files later. But it seems a bit difficult for you to accept so much at once. You should take a rest for 2 days and adapt to the world 70 years later. We have rented an apartment for you nearby, or if you want to live in the SHIELD headquarters, we have staff dormitories here. No, I'd rather live in a rental house. Captain America Rogers said hurriedly. He didn't want to be observed like a strange pet. After sending Captain America Rogers away, Nick Fury and others immediately called Coulson to arrange for the news of Captain America's return to be released, and to be prepared to deal with inquiries from various high-level officials. This news cannot be concealed, and there is no need to conceal it. The news that Captain America Steve Rogers reappeared in the world exploded in the public opinion circle like a nuclear bomb. The hegemony of Americans in culture and public opinion for many years is fully reflected in this Captain America. Because of the US government's unremitting deification movement for many years, Captain America's influence has long exceeded the United States and affected the world. For a time, the top 10 hot searches were all related to Captain America Steve Rogers, and even his related comics, animations, and games, all sales soared. At this time, Lin Feng was happily counting money with a sack. Yes, this time Captain America Steve Rogers returned, and he made a lot of money because he acquired a large number of companies that owned the copyrights of Captain America Steve Rogers' various film and television works in advance. After all, Captain America Rogers has been promoted continuously for so many years, and various copyrights are flying all over the sky. In this process, there are naturally many poorly managed and about to go bankrupt. Captain America is certainly a classic hype, but with the emergence of more and more superheroes now, new superheroes can give people a sense of freshness. In addition, Captain America has been dead for a long time. Even if some people have a lot of money, there are still many people who are poor. But all this will change with the return of Captain America. It was just that Lin Feng did not expect Captain America to return so early, because he vaguely remembered that, although the movie did not specify the time, it seemed that the plot of Avengers 1 would begin not long after Captain America woke up. Captain America's awakening should be 2010 or 2011, but it is only 2009 now. So he spent $1 billion to gradually acquire these related copyrights of Captain America. He wanted to hold them for a long time, for a few years, but he did not expect that Captain America would suddenly return early, which made the valuation of these copyright companies soar. Lin Feng sat behind the desk in his huge office. In front of him was none other than Sharon Carter. At this time, she was reporting to Lin Feng the quotation applications from various companies that were flying in like snowflakes. Boss, these are the 10 companies that quoted today, all of which are well-known cultural companies in the industry. Sharon Carter handed the folder to Lin Feng. During this period, she was so busy that she had to write reports and summaries for S.H.I.E.L.D. secretly, and at the same time, she had to work for Lin Feng. Since Lin Feng's company was a startup company, the talents it needed were not single talents, but compound talents. In order to avoid being fired by Lin Feng, the black-hearted capitalist, Sharon Carter was almost exhausted, especially during the period when Captain America returned. Because she had several newly acquired bankrupt companies, her business volume took off all of a sudden. Lin Feng was a hands-off boss who was always willing to let go, so her business volume suddenly increased, and she was even promoted to vice president by Lin Feng, and there were more things to do. The key is that she found that Lin Feng's company was just a normal investment company. There was nothing special to pay attention to, no dangerous scientific experiments, and no major events such as conspiring to overthrow the government. She didn't understand why the superiors sent her here. Was it to let her experience the life of a working person? Lin Feng looked at Sharon Carter's dark circles and laughed in his heart. Even if you are an agent, so what? An agent has to give me 007. However, seeing that Sharon Carter and Black Widow were exhausted, but they were able to handle various things in an orderly manner, Lin Feng also suspected that they had done this kind of undercover work many times and had gained experience. You know how much we spent to acquire these companies and copyrights, right? Lin Feng asked. I know. Sharon Carter was so angry that her teeth itched, because this was exactly what she had arranged, but she had to sell it again not long after buying it, which made her feel a little bit busy and vain. 5 times, as long as the price they offer is more than 5 times our purchase price, we can sell the company or copyright to them. I believe they will be willing. Lin Feng stretched out a hand and said. Lin Feng did not plan to hold it for a long time. How much energy would it take to operate it for a long time? This wave was enough for him to earn $4 billion US, which can be said to be a wave of profit. What? Pay taxes? If there is still a need to pay taxes, it can only mean that the accounting team is passive and lazy. It's open. It's all open. This is in America. After Sharon Carter received the order, she turned around and left to continue to work on 007. Lin Feng sighed, and he became more and more like a qualified capitalist. No, he is still a pure socialist young man. It's all because of this damn environment. Captain America is back, and now the three giants of the Avengers are all together. Many events in this world are about to begin, Lin Feng said with emotion. Troubled times. As the sky gradually darkened, Lin Feng also got off work on time. Seeing that the lights in the company were still bright, and even the entire office building was still brightly lit, Lin Feng did not look back and drove the newly bought Lamborghini sports car back to the large flat floor luxury house. Although his wealth has jumped several levels now, he did not buy a higher level luxury house. The current one is enough. He opened the diary and started recording today. The progress bar in his mind was about to be full again. After recording today, he could draw a prize again, so he couldn't wait to go home and record his diary. During this period, he drew twice in succession, but he didn't draw anything good. The first one was Dacheo's glasses, which could perfectly hide his identity after wearing them and not be noticed by others. It was a bit like a causal item, and it was too metaphysical. The second one was a skill, gunfighting. After getting it, Lin Feng's mastery of firearms reached the pinnacle, and he was even able to make bullets turn corners, which perfectly proved one thing, that is, being shot in the back dozens of times can indeed be suicide, no problem. This is indeed a very strong skill for ordinary people, but for someone like Lin Feng who is invulnerable, it is not very meaningful. At most it is just to show off. After all, being strong is only temporary, but being handsome is a lifelong thing. It's a troubled time. Now Captain America has revived and returned. Now the three giants of the Avengers have gathered together, a little earlier than I thought. I originally expected it to be around 2010 or 2011. After all, the Chitauri invasion happened right after 2012, and it was also the first time the Avengers gathered together. There were too many scenes. Right square bracket. Chapter 93, Shocking News. The Chitauri invaded in 2012. Fourth update. In Tony Stark's house in New York, Tony Stark took off the dress he had just put on. Pepper was waiting for him outside the door. The two of them were originally planning to attend an official party tonight, where all kinds of high-ranking officials, dignitaries, famous businessmen and wealthy people would gather. Pepper, I can't go today, Tony Stark said. Then the door was opened, and Pepper, who was in a dress, looked at Tony Stark angrily and said, Tony, you have stood me up so many times. What are you studying every day? Pepper, I'm also helpless, but the inspiration has come. Don't you think it should be lived up to? Tony Stark said with a smile. Really? Pepper looked at Tony Stark with a little doubt, her face full of suspicion. If it was before, she would never believe Tony Stark. After all, what kind of character Tony Stark is, others don't know, but she doesn't know. He must have gone to the casino quietly, or he went to play with young models. Anyway, it is difficult to get him to attend those boring official banquets. But recently Tony Stark has been hanging out less and less, and most of the time he is like a technology otaku, working hard at home. Sometimes she even worries about Tony Stark's physical and mental health. This is a bit unlike the playboy he usually is. Of course it's true. Tony Stark said a little speechlessly, how bad is his reputation usually? But he also knows that time is not enough for him. He has even reduced the number of times he goes out to have fun, and he doesn't want to participate in some boring official activities, hearings, etc. He wants to improve his strength as much as possible. He now understands Lin Feng's feelings a little bit. Others can be leisurely and peaceful because they don't know that they are about to face a catastrophe, but he knows that the future of the earth can be said to be full of crises, so, the more he feels that there is a sword hanging over his head and he doesn't know when it will suddenly fall. No wonder Lin Feng, such a rich second generation, is so self-disciplined. Or it's not self-discipline, it's pure fear. But you left me alone there again. Do you know how many times they have looked for you recently? Pepper said very dissatisfiedly. Tony Stark was also a little embarrassed because he knew very well that the official party invited him to attend. What good things could there be? They still wanted to put pressure on him to hand over the production technology of the armor. He wanted to laugh. Just your technology. Can you play it? It's not that he is arrogant. Even if the information is open to them, they can't play it. But there is still pressure. In the United States, capital is not really covering the sky with one hand. At least there are several hands covering the sky together. Then remember to eat. You have a bad stomach. I'm leaving first. Pepper glanced at Tony Stark and knew that it was useless to say it. Who made him such a hard-working life? After Tony Stark sent Pepper away, he changed into a comfortable set of clothes and said, "Why did Lin Feng start recording his diary so early today?" Yes, he only knew that the diary was updated again after receiving the notification from Jarvis and temporarily cancelled his plan to attend the party. When he walked to the basement, the SHIELD team had already come online and the projection on the desktop had already started chatting. "Natter, you don't look good recently," Hawkeye Barton asked with some concern. "Of course not. I have to deal with the tasks given by Fury and Lin Feng. How can I get better? If I hadn't asked for leave today, you wouldn't be able to see me now. These damn evil capitalists." Black Widow Natasha yawned and said, "Hey, I seem to hear someone cursing. It has nothing to do with me, okay? Don't knock everyone down with one stick." Tony Stark said dissatisfiedly after hearing it. "Otherwise, you can come to my company. I'll give you a leisurely job. I promise you won't be tired." Black Widow Natasha glanced at him. Tony Stark was a little speechless, rolled his eyes at him, and said nothing. The capitalist's big cake drawing technique. "Today we have a new member, as everyone knows, Captain America, Steve Rogers," Nick Fury introduced. "Hi, everyone. Please take care of me in the future. I still don't quite understand these devices. There have been so many changes in the past 70 years. Captain America Rogers said. He was fiddling with the projection equipment in his rental house. It was too complicated for him. In his era, watching TV was already a super new technology, not to mention other things. "Captain? Nice to meet you. You are much younger than I thought." Tony Stark glanced at Captain America Rogers. Although his idol was not Captain America, he had to say that he grew up listening to the legend of Captain America, and he was inevitably curious. "You are Tony Stark, right? You look a lot like Howard." Captain America Rogers glanced at Tony Stark and sighed in his heart. He didn't expect that in the blink of an eye. It was really a blink of an eye. The son of his good friend who had been through life and death with him back then was already so old. His mental age was even much older than his. Hearing this, Tony Stark's mouth twitched slightly. Why did he feel like, "Kid, I held you when I was a child. Do you still remember me?" He wanted to say, "Who are you? Don't pretend to be my elder," but this person is really his elder. "Okay, after saying hello, let's start today's diary study," Nick Fury said. "The three giants of the Avengers mentioned here, inferred from previous information, are probably Tony, Thor, and the last one is Captain. This should be correct." Captain America Rogers heard this and was a little confused. He didn't understand why Lin Feng would include him in the three giants of the Avengers. He even just heard of the Avengers, and he is very self-aware. His combat power is much stronger than that of ordinary people, but if he must compare with gods like Thor, then the difference is not a little bit. Tony Stark curled his lips. For the title of the three giants, he just felt that he had not done enough and had to speed up the iteration of the armor. Captain's early recovery and return obviously caught him off guard. He thought it was around 10 or 11 years. It seems that there are things he can't recognize, Hawkeye Barton said. Normal, he was an ordinary person in his previous life. Just like ordinary people reading history, it's good enough to know the general history. Can we expect him to remember the specific years? Hill said. But didn't he buy a lot of companies with copyrights related to the captain before? Is it related to me? Captain America Rogers was a little bit unbelievable. He actually became an IP and had copyrights. In the wild growth era where he lived, it was not that there were no patents or copyrights, but the execution effect was quite touching. Yes, Sharon and I were responsible for this. He probably wanted to hoard a batch of copyrights in his hands and wait for 2 years to use them. Unexpectedly, the captain suddenly returned and directly saved the waiting time. This wave made at least 4 billion. Black Widow Natasha replied. Except for Tony Stark, everyone present couldn't help but shed tears of envy and jealousy. Damn capitalists, is it so easy to make money? At this time, they realized that Lin Feng knew a lot of future things in advance. Even if he didn't remember them clearly, it was enough to bring him countless benefits. Even Tony Stark was a little moved. Unless he relied on the fluctuation of stock prices, it would not be easy to earn 4 billion yuan. I think the key point is this. In 2012, the Chitauri invaded. It's only a few years away. Tony Stark opened his mouth to wake everyone up. Compared with how much money Lin Feng made by using the prophecy, this is a fatal thing. Before, they only knew about this vaguely, but now they not only know the specific time, but also know which alien civilization invaded. Suddenly, the looming mountain pressed down and almost crushed everyone. They also knew one thing very well. For aliens who can cross planets for expeditions, even if they are calculated according to the lowest level of civilization, it would not be much more difficult for European colonists to fight against humans than for Indian natives. No, to be precise, it may be about the same as modern civilization fighting monkeys. The human beings on Earth, a small and skinny monkey tribe that has not yet flown out of the Earth, have no power to fight back. Tony Stark could think of some possible technological applications in the interstellar era, such as what if the other party had the imagined Star Destroyer cannon? With one shot, half of the United States was gone. So how could we fight? The most powerful hydrogen bomb explosion on Earth can only move the ground a few millimeters at most, which is not on the same level at all. It is not as powerful as the energy of the Earth's own volcanic eruptions every day. So how to fight? In other words, how did we win this alien invasion? Tony Stark said. The previous video is the one where the little guy asked Doctor Strange for help. We speculated that the time was 17 years. At that time, the world was peaceful. So, at least we resisted the alien invasion in 12 years. And Lin Feng said that it was the first gathering of the Avengers, which means that we may have really won it ourselves, instead of relying on the wizards of Ancient One. So the question is, how did we win? No matter how I calculate it now, I have no chance of winning. Chapter 94 Ancient One, Odin is actually a bodyguard? 5th update, please subscribe. In fact, since he knew that there would be an alien invasion, Tony Stark did not dare to stop for a moment. While working hard to improve the performance of the armor and complete the iteration of the armor, he also asked Jarvis to use the existing database to deduce. As a result, the result of the deduction was a mess, and they were no match at all. According to the currently recognized civilization classification level on Earth, the Earthlings cannot even reach the first level civilization, probably only 0.7 level civilization, and they have not even been able to fully utilize the energy on their own Earth. The second level civilization can already utilize the energy of the entire star system, and this Chitauri is even the most conservatively estimated second level civilization. After Tony entered the technology and weapons that he could imagine that the second level civilization possessed into the database, he deduced. As a result, no matter how many times he deduced, it was a dead end, and there was no chance of winning. So he was under more pressure and more anxious, and his mental consumption had reached the extreme. Because he could not think of any possibility of winning, and his personality was not the so-called character of not caring about anything, and there must be a way when the car reaches the mountain. But from the subsequent videos, they won the final victory, so the question is, how did they win? I can't even think of it. I dare not even think of it. The others were the same. They couldn't figure it out at all. But now we know the name of this alien, the Chitauri. At least we can ask. Don't we have channels now? Either ask Thor, or ask the Skrulls. Fury, what do you think? Ask the Black Widow Natasha. Thor is too far away. When he will come back to Earth is not something we can control. I'll ask the Skrulls. Nick Fury said. Fury, last time I asked you to collect some Skrull blood and skin tissue. How are you preparing? Tony Stark asked. Nick Fury heard this and immediately asked, what do you want to do? What else can I do? Tony Stark said with a sneer. I can't sleep well when there are strangers in my house. Didn't you say that the Skrulls can even imitate humans perfectly? Aren't you nervous? When one of us is replaced, we don't know. I have to figure out the principle behind it, and at the same time, there must be a way to detect it. Do you understand? Hearing this, everyone nodded. It was indeed the case. Since knowing that there were so many Skrulls, and they were still living on the Earth, everyone's anxiety was also triggered. Tony Stark's worry was also everyone's worry, and Captain America Rogers was still immersed in disbelief. There were actually such aliens. The changes in the past 70 years were too incredible for an old antique like him. I understand. I have prepared those. I will send them to you later, but I also want a copy of the research results, Nick Fury said. Although he had to borrow the Skrulls' channels to understand what race the Chitauri were, it did not prevent Nick Fury from also feeling apprehensive. The things mentioned in Lin Feng's diary last time were also a revelation to him. He didn't know what he was thinking. It was outrageous that he didn't guard against such an obvious hidden danger. This was not his style. Then Nick Fury exited the projection state and called the Skrull leader he knew to ask about the Chitauri. After a while, he came back, calmed down, and then said, I asked. There is indeed such an alien race in the universe, and it is also very famous in the universe. It is an alien civilization under the command of a very powerful alien overlord in the universe. It is said that they usually help this alien overlord to kill countless planets. It is also a well-known bully army in the universe. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but take a breath. Now all the information matched. This is not just an alien civilization, but an aggressive alien civilization. It has slaughtered countless planets, and will naturally not let the Earth go. Not to mention that there is a terrifying so-called alien overlord behind them. It is even more unknown how powerful it is to be called an overlord by the Skrulls. This further proves that what Lin Feng said in his diary is correct. Facing such a terrifying alien army, how can they win? There is simply no chance of winning. It's over. It seems that we can't escape the stage of fighting aliens. Hawkeye Barton said a little helplessly. It feels that the future is simply bleak. His personal strength is outstanding among humans, but if he fights an alien army, he will probably be killed in seconds. Hey, I suddenly feel that, whether it is Ancient One or Odin, their existence is not a bad thing for us. At least we can rely on them. Hillsiden said. There are more terrible crises, such as the invasion of Dormammu, the Lord of the Dark Dimension, but the problem is that Dormammu is dealt with by mages, so they can feel at ease and ignore this, because it is useless to care. But if faced with the invasion of alien civilizations, will the mages' tricks still be useful? Yes, I also feel that we are a bit of a clown now. We have been fighting wits and courage with the air. I'm afraid that others don't bother to pay attention to us. Black Widow Natasha said helplessly. Their existence is just a kind of protection for us. Everyone nodded. Since they knew that this world was so dangerous, with Dormammu invading on the magic side and Chitauri invading on the science side, they suddenly felt that the previous defenses did not seem so necessary. And more practically, what is the use of their defenses? Can they solve any problems? Obviously, they can't. I don't understand why these aliens have to take a fancy to the Earth. In Lin Feng's words, the Earth is a rural area in the Milky Way and there are no special resources. What is there to be proud of? Why do they have to invade the Earth? Hawkeye Barton complained. And Tony Stark at this time, in the palace of Asgard, Thor and Odin, the king of gods, looked at the Chitauri mentioned in the diary, and the faces of the father and son began to become solemn. Compared to the ignorance of those people on Earth, their horizons are much broader. Even Thor, although he has never had a direct confrontation with the Chitauri, has heard of the Thanos Legion that is active in various parts of the universe and slaughters planets everywhere. That name is really too big. Especially Thor is considered to be a kind and lawful camp, although there was a precedent of leading people to fight against the frost giants without authorization before. It was just to consolidate the throne and make the frost giants submit to him, like they submitted to his father. But he is essentially inclined to protect. Not only do he have sacrifices on Earth, but he has left his footprints and sacrifices on many planets. So for the Chitauri, a bully army that kills planets everywhere and kills others at will, he really has no good feelings. Father, that Thanos is one of the few father level masters you listed for me that must not be provoked, right? Thor said. In order to prevent his son from being blind and really angering the father level boss, Odin specifically listed the names of the father level bosses he knew so that his son would know. One of them was Thanos. Yes, it's him, Odin said. He remembered the previous dealings with Thanos. It took a lot of effort to force Thanos back that time, which also aggravated his injuries. But there was no way. According to the agreement between him and Ancient One, the crises in the region from the main universe level were all resisted by him, and the dimensional demons from other dimensions were the responsibility of Ancient One. The two sides basically had a clear division of labor, and as the nominal lord of the earth, he could not ignore it. But now it seems that Thanos has regained his ambition for the earth. Now the problem is getting tricky. He will not live for a few years, and Lin Feng's diary mentioned that Ancient One will not live for a few years either. In other words, if the two giants who openly protect the earth disappear, then if Thanos gets this news, what will he do is completely imaginable. And it's not that Odin is so selfless that he would fight to the death for a nominal territory like the earth. Rather, the existence of the earth is a weather vane. If the earth also falls, then Asgard, which is also on the world tree, will not escape the fate of destruction. But now it's not a question of whether we go to provoke him or not, but he is going to come to our door. Father. Thor looked at Odin and said, in his opinion, Asgard's territory also includes the earth. No matter how long it has been since he patrolled, no matter whether he really manages it, but since he is the lord of the earth, he has a responsibility. Asgard is a people, not a place. Encouraging you to be brave does not mean that you are reckless. Do you understand? Odin glanced at his son. Brave but without strategy, you can't be a real king. Odin has been considering whether he can go out to fight directly now and fight Thanos, or at least severely injure Thanos to buy more time for his stupid son. But after thinking about it, he decided to forget it. If he really fights, his eldest daughter will be born early, and he will be finished by then. Life is really a dilemma. Thor nodded, and the sense of crisis in his heart instantly increased. 2012, according to the Earthling's way of counting years, seemed to be only a few years away. He didn't have much time left. Chapter 95, Iron Man's Dark History, that he wants to erase. 6th update, please subscribe. Lin Feng didn't know that his short diary entry had caused great mental exhaustion to the people who read it. For him, there might not be many days left for his carefree days. The most famous of them is the famous scene of Iron Man carrying a nuclear bomb. It is also Tony Stark's first battle with a mortal body to compete with gods. It is breathtaking. However, can Tony Stark still have this kind of awareness this time? Without going to Afghanistan, without truly experiencing life and death, without wandering between life and death, without experiencing the crazy indulgence of dying from palladium poisoning, without the deep memory of his father teaching him a lesson 20 years after his death, can he still be the Tony Stark in his memory? It's hard to say, but it has to be said that Howard Stark is worthy of being able to give birth to a genius like Tony Stark. He is indeed amazing, but he is just restricted by the times. Otherwise, his current achievements may not be worse than Tony Stark. A mortal body can't stand shoulder to shoulder with gods. Everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. turned to look at Tony Stark with doubts in their hearts. Could this person really do what Lin Feng said and finally achieve the goal of standing shoulder to shoulder with gods with a mortal body? This is too incredible, right? Tony Stark couldn't help scratching his head. Could it be that the person Lin Feng was talking about was really him? Even with his calm psychological quality, seeing these descriptions, he felt a little weird. Could this be describing himself? Not to mention others, even he himself felt very weird. Carrying a nuclear bomb? What does it mean? Can I still carry a nuclear bomb? Tony Stark racked his brains and couldn't figure it out. What kind of famous scene is this? He couldn't understand it at all. But then he thought, there's nothing wrong with this. What can be wrong with this? He, Tony Stark, is a person with such awareness. Although, it seems not bad to stand shoulder to shoulder with gods with a mortal body. Tony Stark muttered to himself. Natasha, the Black Widow, looked at Tony Stark meaningfully. The first part only said that Tony Stark was as good as a god with his mortal body, but the latter part said a series of hardships for Tony Stark, such as going to Afghanistan to experience life and death, palladium poisoning, near-death indulgence, and being taught a lesson by his father 20 years after his death. It seems that the original Tony Stark should have experienced a lot of things. Tony Stark also noticed these, but he would never admit that he did not have that kind of awareness. Well, it may not be as profound as his own feelings in the original timeline, but it is definitely not that unbearable. For smart people, knowledge is like turning stones into gold, and Tony Stark is definitely such a smart person. And he was a little unconvinced, saying that his father was a great genius and gave birth to a genius like him. This is true. He said that he was limited by the times. Tony Stark also thought that he was right, but he said that he had been dead for 20 years and he could still be taught. He didn't believe it. Tony, who was going crazy because of near death, was redeemed by his father 20 years ago. No matter how many times you watch it, you will still feel some emotion, right? A video appeared in the diary and everyone clicked it. To everyone's surprise, the beginning was not Howard Stark mentioned in it, but Tony Stark wearing a golden and red mark armor, playing DJs and having a party. He looked wanton and crazy, holding a bottle of wine in his hand, stumbling. Even Pepper was speechless when she saw this scene. Until later, Tony Stark's friend War Machine Rhodes came. This crazy party continued. And his reckless behavior, even using energy cannons to hit watermelons and wine bottles, also completely angered his friend Rhodes. Tony, are the parties you usually hold at home so crazy? You have such a heavy taste. Hawkeye Barton couldn't help but complain. Although he knew the tricks played by these rich kids and playboys, such a crazy party like a psychopath still made him frown slightly. No, actually, in most cases, it's normal. At least I won't wear the armor at this party, like a clown who is trying to attract attention. Tony Stark couldn't help but complain. Although he was complaining about the self in the video, he was very angry. He felt that the self in the video, oh no, maybe the self in another timeline, was ruining his reputation. Yes, he usually played a little bit, was a little more open, and had a lot of women, but he would not joke about his iron armor. That was his hard work, and he used it to fight evil and prepare to resist aggression. And the self in the video actually used the armor to hold a party wantonly to please those blonde girls at the party, which was also a humiliation for him. Captain America Rogers frowned slightly. In his era, although the atmosphere of the upper class was not particularly good, the atmosphere of the whole society was much better than today. 70 years later, the messing was in private, and messing in public like this undoubtedly challenged the values of people in that era. For a moment, everyone was very angry and speechless. Especially Tony Stark, who felt that this was simply his own black history. His reckless behavior finally angered Rhodes. He went down to the basement and came out wearing a silver white battle armor, yelling at everyone, saying, "I'll only say this once, get out." Seeing his friend coming out in a battle armor, Tony Stark was not surprised, nor angry, nor did he feel that his friend had stolen his battle armor. His expression was extremely calm, as if he had expected this day. He even asked the DJ to play a powerful song to cheer him up. Rhodes roared that Tony Stark was not qualified to wear this battle armor and asked him to take it off. The two sides wrestled directly together. The two were like two children, fighting with the fitness equipment in the gym, and even hit the center of the crowd, shocking everyone to retreat again and again. Both sides were injured in the fight. When Tony Stark woke up, Rhodes had already left in his armor. Tony Stark could have asked Jarvis to stop it, but he didn't. He just watched him go. Seeing this, everyone looked at Tony Stark in shock, because they knew how much Tony Stark valued the armor technology. During this period of time, he had been under pressure from the military, the government, and foreign consortiums, but he refused to let the armor technology leak out. Tony Stark even said a very famous saying that the weapons humans have given humans a high enough killing efficiency, and they don't need more. And Rhodes' background is undoubtedly a military background. And Tony Stark handed over the armor like this, without any obstruction, which is not in line with his habit. So, is it the palladium poisoning that Lin Feng said, the madness before death? Hill asked carefully. Everyone suddenly remembered that the diary seemed to mention this point, that is, Tony Stark's madness before death due to palladium poisoning. They didn't see the palladium poisoning, but they saw the madness before death. Tony Stark, a respectable and wealthy young man who usually looks high and mighty, is like a crazy clown at this time. He even changes his mind and lets his good brother take his armor away. Is this what Lin Feng said, that after experiencing life and death, there will be earth-shaking changes in personality? It is indeed an earth-shaking change. Tony Stark also noticed this and realized why he behaved like a psychopath in the video, especially when he handed the armor to Rhodes. I'm afraid it was because he didn't want to embarrass his good brother. After all, Rhodes has come to him more than once or twice because of this matter during this period. The military also put a lot of pressure on him. He knows all this very well. But now he has begun to seriously think about whether to let his good brother take back her armor so that he can have a good job. Anyway, according to his estimation, the military cannot break his technology, and the final right of use is likely to be in the hands of his good brother. Jarvis, help me calculate this palladium poisoning. If poisoned, how long can a person live? Tony Stark asked. After a moment, Jarvis gave the answer and said, at most half a year, but if the palladium element can be isolated, there is a way to treat it. Tony Stark immediately understood where the problem was. It was not the problem of the palladium element. The palladium element can actually be isolated. For example, the energy used by his current armor is produced by the nuclear fusion reaction of the palladium element, but it has no effect on him. But the person in the video seemed to be different. He remembered that in the last video, after a bad day took away the arc reactor, his face immediately turned pale, as if he was dying. In other words, he had to rely on the arc reactor to survive at that time, so at that time, he was actually facing a dilemma. Either use the arc reactor and slowly die of palladium poisoning, or don't use the arc reactor and then die immediately. It's that simple. And later he asked Jarvis to conduct a deduction and analysis. According to his symptoms and his experience in Afghanistan, he speculated what might be wrong with him, which led to the use of the arc reactor, otherwise he would die. The deduced results indicated that there were most likely shrapnel in his body, with tiny fragments flowing in his blood vessels, and he had to use the magnetic force generated by the arc reactor to absorb these fragments. Otherwise, the shrapnel would flow away with the blood and he would die soon. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96. Science still has to make sense. It's not magic. 7th update. Please subscribe. This result is consistent with what Lin Feng said about experiencing life and death in Afghanistan. After all, if he had not been hit by a bomb and had so many shrapnel on his body, he would not have ended up like this. And those small fragments should be very difficult to deal with. Later, he asked Jarvis to make a deduction based on the current level of medical technology. The deduction result was that, if he was full of those small shrapnel, the success rate of the operation would be very low, and he might die. After deducing to this point, he understood why he behaved like this in another timeline, and why he behaved so crazy. Because left is death, right is death, there is no way to survive. So, this can be regarded as madness before death. He was a little fortunate and a little scared. Fortunately, he believed what Lin Feng said in his diary and did not go to Afghanistan. Otherwise, even if he did not die, he would have to face torture day and night. Thinking of this, he hated a bad day even more. This guy relied on being his elder and did such dirty things behind his back. But according to what Lin Feng said in his diary, if he had not experienced this, and had not experienced the situation of being on the verge of death due to palladium poisoning, would his awareness be reduced? Impossible. That must be impossible. The scene continued, and then the scene turned, and Tony Stark, who had just finished a fight, was sitting on a huge donut-shaped building, eating donuts, as if he didn't care what had just happened. It makes people doubt his mental state. Could it be that some mutations really happened? Anyway, in Tony Stark's view, every frame of this scene is a black history. When he had memories, the Stark family had already made a fortune. He was a legitimate second-generation rich man, not an Alvorish. He had also experienced formal etiquette training. Although he had a rebellious personality and loved to show off, it didn't mean that he was a psychopath. But now in the video, he probably knew that he was going to die, and now he is completely self-destructive. Tony Stark was also found by Nick Fury and Black Widow Natasha. The two came to the restaurant. Tony Stark said directly, "I don't want to join your Superman boy group." Nick Fury smiled and said, "I remember that you did everything by yourself." What was the result? The result. Iron Man was speechless and choked. After a while, he said, "Sorry, I don't want to cause your misunderstanding, but should I look at your eye patch or your eyes? To be honest, I'm a little hungover. I'm not sure if you are a real person or an illusion." "I'm a real person. I'm the most real person you have ever seen," Nick Fury said word by word from his teeth. "I'm so lucky. Where are the employees here?" Tony Stark looked around and tried to change the subject. Nick Fury took the opportunity to point to Tony Stark's neck, which was already covered with dense lines. "You don't look good." At this time, everyone realized that Tony Stark's palladium poisoning seemed to have reached a level that was difficult to cure. "I've had worse situations," Tony Stark said nonchalantly. Of course, maybe he just looked nonchalant. At this moment, a charming figure slowly approached. "I cleared the entire area, but it's best not to spend too much time." A woman's voice came. The camera turned, and Iron Man took off his glasses in astonishment, and then looked over, only to see that it was a beautiful woman with a curvy figure, but it was none other than Natasha, the Black Widow. "You are fired," Iron Man said in the video, a little drunk. "That's not up to you to decide." Black Widow smiled and sat next to Nick Fury, while Nick Fury next to him smiled and said, "Tony, this is Agent Romanoff. Hi." Tony Stark rubbed his head, as if he was still judging whether the person in front of him was real or fake, and the sequelae of a hangover were clearly revealed. "I'm an undercover agent of SHIELD. When we knew you were sick, Director Fury sent me to observe you," Black Widow explained. Iron Man said with an ugly face, "You'd better apologize to me." Black Widow did not answer. Nick Fury beside him said, "You have been busy. You appointed Pepper Potts as CEO, gave your property away, and let your friend fly away wearing the iron armor. If I didn't know the situation, I didn't give it to him. He took it away." Tony Stark immediately retorted, "Whoa, what? He took it away?" Nick Fury said with an exaggerated expression, "You are Iron Man. He just took it away. He beat you up and then took away your iron armor? Is this possible?" Nick Fury looked at Black Widow beside him and asked loudly. Black Widow smiled slightly and mercilessly exposed. "According to Mr. Stark's security inspection procedure system, unauthorized use can be avoided." Tony Stark outside the screen was also a little embarrassed. Although he knew that this was probably the reality, he deliberately let Rhodes go and let him take the armor away, but it was still a little embarrassing to be said directly in front of others. "Natasha, you are really venomous, better than me," Tony Stark complained. "No, I'm still not as good as you," Black Widow Natasha said with a slight smile. "You are the venomous tongue officially recognized by Lin Feng." At this time, in the picture, Nick Fury immediately turned his eyes back to Iron Man. "What do you want me to do?" Tony Stark asked. "What do I want you to do?" No, I should say, what do you want me to do?" Nick Fury said. "You are now becoming a problem person that I need to deal with. You may be wrong. My world does not revolve around you. There are bigger problems in the Southwest that I need to deal with," Nick Fury said angrily. "Give him a shot." At this time, Black Widow took out an injection and injected Tony Stark's neck. "Are you going to sell my kidney?" Tony Stark was confused, but he didn't stop talking. At this time, the three people outside the picture found that the veins on Iron Man's neck were bulging, and the dense veins disappeared in a short time and returned to normal. "What did she do to me just now?" Tony Stark felt much better. Nick Fury sighed and said, "We are doing this for your own good. That's lithium dioxide, which can relieve your symptoms. We want you to go back to work." Tony Stark sighed and said, "Give me 2 more boxes, and I'll be fine." He was not very happy, because he still had a way to relieve palladium poisoning, but the problem was that he couldn't leave the arc reactor, and as long as the arc reactor was in his body for a day, he would continue to be poisoned by palladium. That's not an antidote, it can only relieve your symptoms. It's not easy to cure you. Nick Fury looked at Tony Stark and said, "Believe me, I know. I understand the situation. I have been looking for a substitute element for palladium. I have tried every combination of every element." Tony Stark said seriously. Nick Fury smiled and said, "I'm here to tell you that you haven't tried them all." Tony Stark in the picture stood up immediately and stared at Nick Fury. This was his area of expertise. Why did this boiled egghead in front of him say that he was good at this? Want to know? Let's talk somewhere else, Nick Fury said with a smile. The scene changed, and the two had returned to Tony Stark's mansion. At this time, the mansion was in a mess, with ruins everywhere. The thing on your chest was made based on unfinished technology, Nick Fury said in the picture. No, it's a finished product. Tony Stark immediately retorted. He would not allow anyone to tarnish his great work. It worked only after I shrunk it. No. Nick Fury shook his head. Your father said that the light arc reaction device was just a springboard for greater technology. He was going to start an energy competition that would leave all his opponents far behind. His dream was bigger. In comparison, the nuclear reactor would be like a number 7 battery. Only him? Anton Vank is also involved. Tony Stark poured some wine and said in a seemingly nonchalant manner. He had checked the information before, so he naturally knew something about Anton Vanko. It seemed that the incident was covered up by someone, but from some fragmentary information, he still deduced the truth. That is, Anton Vanko probably cooperated with his father, but later he was expelled from the United States for some unknown reason. So Ivan Vanko could make products similar to the arc reactor. Anton Vanko is like the other side of the coin. He thought it was a way to make a fortune. After your father found out, he expelled him from the country. When the Russian government found that he couldn't deliver the goods, he was sent to Siberia. Nick Fury explained. Then he lived a life of drunkenness and dreams for the past 20 years, which is not good for the growth of children. The one you met in Monaco is his son. Except for Nick Fury, who knew what was going on, everyone else outside the screen was confused, especially Tony Stark, who didn't understand what was going on. Well, this seems to involve the arc reactor, but the original sketch of the arc reactor was indeed drafted by my father Howard Stark, who later perfected and produced the final product. And my father, as Lin Feng said, was limited by the technological limitations of the times, so he was unable to produce it. Otherwise, it would be impossible for me to develop, design and produce the arc reactor in such a short time. After all, science still has to make sense. It's not magic. Chapter 97 Tony, what's wrong with me being a genius and pretending to be cool? Is it not okay? 8 more. So, Fury, how many things are you hiding from me? Tony Stark asked. Nick Fury was also a little embarrassed. Originally, because Tony Stark was not poisoned by palladium this time, the new element left by Howard Stark did not need to be mentioned specifically, but now it was exposed by Lin Feng. Not much, but now you know it, don't you? Nick Fury said directly with a dark face and a dark heart. Tony Stark glanced at Nick Fury. He knew that there must be something hidden, and there was a big secret, otherwise it would not be possible. Because the things involved are already at the government level. This Anton Vank sounds like his father's partner, and he will meet Anton Vank's son in the future? I have to go back and check this matter carefully. After all, Anton Vank was deported, which means that some secrets may be involved, and finally even the government stepped in to deal with it. In that era, it was the critical time for the US-Soviet hegemony. There were spies around those top scientists. Anton Vanko, whose name was a Russian, would definitely not be trusted. According to his consistent understanding of the nature of the US government, it was possible that, after developing the technology, the US government would directly drive him away. As for whether Anton Vanko really wanted to sell the technology abroad, it was no longer important. He was a Russian, and this was his original sin. Not to mention, if, as Nick Fury said, he wanted to sell the technology to the Russian government, he was lucky not to be killed. Before he could think more, Tony Stark in the video asked, "You said I didn't try everything. What do you mean? What haven't I tried?" Faced with the hope of life, he finally couldn't hold back. He said that only you have the resources and wisdom to complete the plan he started. Nick Fury raised his glass and said. Hearing this, Tony Stark was a little dumbfounded. He never thought that his father's evaluation of him was so high. Because since he could remember, his father had high expectations for him. Other children's A was enough to make their parents proud, but for him, it was just the basics. He never heard a word of praise. He even had to send himself to boarding school in the end. This is why the two sides fell out later, and he decided to do the opposite of what his father wanted him to be. He wanted to be serious, so he was absurd. He wanted to be clean, so he played hard. He wanted to be like a traditional Puritan, so he became a playboy known to the whole world. In the end, they didn't even see each other for the last time. In his cognition, his father had never been satisfied with him, and he was always dissatisfied. But what he heard from Nick Fury was a different evaluation, and he was stunned. In the video, Nick Fury looked at Tony Stark leisurely and said, "Is he talking about you? If it's you, you can solve the mystery in your heart." Nick Fury said mysteriously. Tony Stark shook his head and said, "I don't know how you know these things, but he doesn't think much of me. What do you remember about your father?" Nick Fury asked. Thinking of this, Tony Stark suddenly had some desire to confide. He said, "He is very cold and scheming. He has never said that he loves me or likes me. Now you tell me that he said I can change the future. I find it hard to believe. And he passed this responsibility to me. I don't understand. His happiest day was the day he sent me to boarding school. No, he is not like that," Nick Fury said while drinking water. "Oh. Then it is obvious that you know my father better than me," Tony Stark sneered and said. Tony Stark outside the screen also had mixed feelings. It turned out that his father had such expectations for him in his heart. In the blink of an eye, it has been 20 years since his father and mother passed away. It has been so long that, if you don't think about it specifically, you can't remember what your parents look like. He has also grown from that rebellious teenager to a rebellious middle-aged man. He even didn't know whether his rebellion now was his true nature or just a rebellious habit from his youth. He rebelled at that time to show it to his father, so who can he rebel to now? No one can see it, and no one will come. He will never have the chance to reconcile with his father. He will never have the chance to change his image of a naughty child in his father's mind. What's more regrettable is that he will never have the chance to let his father know that he has changed. He has not only taken on the responsibility of Stark Industries, but also carried it forward. Then, Nick Fury in the video broke the shocking news that Howard Stark was one of the founders of SHIELD. Of course, Tony Stark in this timeline knew about this. Nick Fury didn't stay along in the picture because he had another meeting in the afternoon. He just left a message for Tony Stark. "Oh, Tony, remember, I will keep an eye on you." Hearing this, Tony Stark outside the picture couldn't help but complain. "Fury, you really love to pretend. When you first appeared in front of me, do you remember what you said? Do you think you are the only superhero in the world? You said that when you broke into my private territory and cut off my power." Nick Fury was a little embarrassed. Since he became the director of SHIELD, he has become accustomed to speaking with mysticism. That's right, Tony. Fury's love of pretending is just as good as yours. You two are almost the same. Natasha, the Black Widow on the side, nodded and complained about both of them in one breath. She has been holding it in for too long. These two pretenders are more and more pretentious than each other. One loves to pretend to be mysterious, and the other loves to pretend to be in the limelight. They are different types, but equally hateful. Tony Stark almost choked to death. He was the one who complained about Nick Fury. Why did he complain about himself? Well, even if he took a step back and said that he also liked to show off, so what? He was a billionaire, a super genius, a physical scientist, and the most popular superhero in the world, Iron Man. After being busy for half his life, couldn't he enjoy himself? Can't he show off? Who doesn't have a hobby? Just as Tony Stark was gritting his teeth, he had already opened the box left by Nick Fury in the picture. There were design drawings, arc reaction device, number TFTR1, Vank, Stark. But a moment later, he turned to a videotape. When he played it, Tony Stark saw Howard Stark appear on the screen. Tony Stark's eyes turned red outside the screen. He almost didn't remember that his father was still so young and vigorous. It seemed that the vague impression in his memory was when he was very young. When he reached adolescence and began to have memories, his father was already very old. Because Howard Stark was already very old when Tony Stark was born, most of Tony Stark's impressions of his father were that his father was white-haired, cold and old-fashioned. Now seeing the middle-aged Howard Stark, he couldn't help feeling uncomfortable, as if the tree wanted to be quiet, but the wind didn't stop, and the son wanted to raise his parents, but they were not there. Howard Stark in the video said with high spirits, "Everything can be achieved through technology, a better life, a healthy body, and the possibility of maintaining world peace for the first time in human history." Iron Man lay on the sofa, flipping through the notes left by his father, listening to his father's voice in his ears, and writing and drawing on his mobile phone. "I'm Howard Stark. Everything you need for the future is here. Future City, capital of tomorrow. Future City, wait a minute." In the ancient picture, Howard Stark was pacing back and forth, introducing his proud inventions. "I'm Howard Stark. Everything you need for the future is here. I want to personally serve Stark Industries." He was halfway through his speech when a child appeared behind him. "Tony, what are you doing? What is that? Put it back to where it came from," Howard Stark said. The sudden appearance of the young Tony Stark also attracted everyone's attention. It turned out that this showy Tony Stark had a childhood. If Tony Stark knew what they were thinking, he would probably be speechless. No one is born out of a crack in a stone, and everyone has a childhood. "Tony, where is your mother?" "Mariah, go, take him away." Howard Stark asked someone to take the young Tony Stark away. Tony Stark looked as if it was just as he expected. His father had always been impatient and indifferent to him. It was a typical father-son relationship in an old white man's family. After a while, Howard Stark reappeared. At this time, he smiled and said while drinking, "Are you waiting for me?" Then there was another burst of behind-the-scenes footage, which seemed to have no memorable points. Iron Man got up helplessly. It was another fruitless day. He put down his notebook and took a sip of wine. But suddenly Howard Stark in the picture became serious. "Tony, you are still too young, and you don't understand, so I will shoot this segment for you first. All of this is made for you." These words shocked both Tony Stark inside and outside the screen. Chapter 98 Howard, my greatest creation will always be you, Tony. Especially in their impression, their father had never said such words to them, at least not when he was alive. As long as he could remember, there were only quarrels, and quarrels. One day you will understand that this represents not only the invention of mankind, but also my life's achievement. With Howard Stark's words, the camera turned to the model of the expo. "This is the key to the future. I'm limited by the technology of this era, but one day you will understand all of this, and then you will change the world." Howard Stark stood in front of the camera, his face full of kindness, but full of happiness. "My greatest creation will always be just you." For a moment, Tony Stark was stunned, as if he was shot, and was pierced by this sentence. This video made him re-understand his father, a father he had never seen. After so many years, he was sure for the first time that his father really loved him. And through this conversation, he achieved reconciliation with his father and himself. He no longer had to give up on himself and think that he was a child that no one wanted and no one liked. He had a pair of parents who loved him very much, although the reconciliation was completed many years after his father's death. But now there is only great relief in my heart. The scene changed, and when everyone was still immersed in Howard Stark's father-son relationship with Tony Stark, suddenly, they saw a scene that impressed them. Tony Stark used a Rolex, a gold watch worth at least hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then exchanged it for a box of strawberries on the roadside. This scene made everyone's eyelids jump. What is rich and inhumane? This is rich and inhumane. How much is their monthly salary? Tens of thousands of dollars? In other words, even if everyone present is an elite with a high income, they have to work hard for at least a year, and they have to go without food and drink, and now they use it to exchange for a box of strawberries. Are these strawberries made of gold? What is rich? This is fucking rich. What a vicious capitalist. Tony, are you usually so rich? Hawky Barton said faintly. He remembered that he had to work hard to support his family and was diligent every month, and he dared not be absent from work. As a result, these damn capitalists just exchanged a watch for strawberries. It was outrageous. Otherwise, I will bring you a box of strawberries every day in the future, and you just need to give me a watch like this. Hawky Barton continued. Tony Stark smiled slightly and said, not impossible. Considering his wealth, he might have earned back the gold watch in the short time he spent getting off the car to buy strawberries. Money is just a number. I have no interest in money. I have never touched money. The happiest time for me was when my parents were still alive, even if there was not much money at that time. When Tony Stark rushed to the company, Pepper was dealing with the aftermath of his handing over the Mark II to Rhodes. It can be said that she was quite overwhelmed. Tony Stark tried to please Pepper with strawberries, but it happened to hit the muzzle of the gun, because Pepper happened to be allergic to strawberries. As a result, Tony Stark, who was always eloquent, couldn't even organize any decent words, and was kicked out. Everyone couldn't help laughing at this scene. Although Tony Stark was in a miserable state at this time, suffering from palladium poisoning and dying, they still couldn't help laughing, probably because Tony Stark seemed to have found a solution. Tony Stark outside the screen was also a little embarrassed because he didn't know that Pepper was allergic to strawberries and he liked to eat strawberries. Thinking about it, he really didn't know much about Pepper. In other words, as the main force, Pepper knew him very well, but he didn't know much about her. Before everyone finished laughing, Tony Stark had already moved the model of the Industrial Expo of that year back home. Jarvis, please make a digital model. I need a projection screen that can be operated. Tony Stark said, and a brand new projection screen immediately appeared in front of him. 1974 Stark Industrial Expo. The model has been scanned, sir. Jarvis immediately completed the scanning work. Tony Stark moved the projection of the entire digital model and asked, how many buildings are there in total, including the Belgian waffle stand? Jarvis asked, I'm just asking. Show me. Iron Man put the digital model in front of him and found a chair to sit down. What does this look like? It looks a bit like an atom. It looks a bit like an atom. Tony Stark inside and outside the screen said almost at the same time. Obviously, Tony Stark outside the screen made the same judgment as Iron Man. They are essentially the same person, with similar ages and experiences, and they almost immediately thought of the same thing. The nucleus should be here. Iron Man pointed at the center of the digital model. Highlight the big sphere. Take away the walkway. Throw it all away. Iron Man waved his hand and took them all away. What do you want to achieve? Jarvis asked. I want to discover, to correct, it is to rediscover a new element. Tony Stark said while stroking his beard. Get rid of the landscape, the bushes, the trees, the parking lot exit, and the entrance. Use the pavilion as a structure to form protons and neutrons. Soon, Jarvis's powerful computing ability was reflected, and the calculation results appeared. The projection of a brand new element appeared in front of Tony Stark. A brand new element that had never been discovered before was now displayed in front of Tony Stark. At this time, everyone looked at Tony Stark because they couldn't understand these things either. Only Tony Stark could understand his own operation on another timeline. In the picture, Tony Stark looked at everything in front of him silently and then said, "You have been dead for 20 years, and you still have to teach me." Tony Stark outside the picture had a similar view. For 20 years, he thought he had surpassed his father in all aspects, invented the arc reactor that his father could not invent, and brought Stark Industries to the peak, reaching the peak that his father had never reached. He thought he had surpassed his father, but now he realized that he had never surpassed his father. At most, he was standing on his father's shoulders and looking further. His father was just limited by the level of technology at that time. Otherwise, as Lin Feng said, he might not be worse than himself. At this time, he also understood what his father meant by the key to the new era. This new element can solve the problem of human energy, which is enough to start a new energy revolution and lay a solid foundation for mankind to enter the next era. In the video, Tony Stark laughed like a kid in his 30s. He clapped his hands, and the projection of the new element appeared in his palms. Sir, the new element you discovered should be able to replace the palladium element you are using. Jarvis reminded. Thank you, Dad. Iron Man looked at the projection of the glowing new element in his hand and said sincerely, in this life, probably only this time, he sincerely thanked his father. His father, who had died 20 years ago, saved his life at a critical moment. The video ended here, and everyone was still immersed in the video just now. From the beginning when Tony Stark thought he could not survive, to the end, when he finally found the new element and saved his life, they saw a series of changes. At this time, they finally understood what Lin Feng said about Tony Stark and himself in another timeline. What was missing was these experiences. A person's character and consciousness are all shaped by his experiences. Are all of you scientists so brain burning? I feel like a poor student. I kept my eyes open and didn't dare to miss any step, but the moment I bent down to pick up the pen, the content on the blackboard had changed from 1 + 1 = 2 to calculus. In that moment, I couldn't understand it at all. Hawkeye Barton complained. You know, this is not something that ordinary people can understand. Tony Stark said proudly. Jarvis, use the new element to deduce, compared with palladium, how much energy output can be increased? Complete sir, this new element can double the instantaneous energy output compared to palladium, which is better than palladium. Jarvis replied. Very good, I will use this new element later. Tony Stark clapped his hands and made a decision. The attack power of his Mark armor is largely limited by the output power. At the same time, Tony Stark felt that he probably felt more deeply in another timeline because he was really saved by his father across 20 years. Without these insights and feelings about life, can he really have the enlightenment that Lin Feng said and then compare himself with gods with his mortal body? With a mortal body, he can compare himself with gods. This battle of the Avengers is really Tony Stark's battle to be a god. At the same time, his identity as Iron Man and superhero completely surpasses his identity as a super rich man, playboy, super genius, and physicist. Even if he still has so many identities, after stripping off the iron armor, his most dazzling identity in this life is only one. That is Iron Man, Tony Stark. Tony Stark looked at the description of himself in Lin Feng's diary and couldn't believe it. Was that Lin Feng's evaluation? Chapter 99 Opening Lightning Strike, Nuclear Explosion in New York. 10 more chapters. Please subscribe. After all, Lin Feng's comments on him in his diary were not very high in the past. He was a vicious capitalist, a poisonous tongue, and a megalomaniac. Anyway, he complained no less than the egghead and the fuck man. He seemed to have complaints about everyone, except for Black Widow, which made them joke that Lin Feng really liked Black Widow. But now, these comments on him are simply too high. Sure enough, I'm a born protagonist. Wherever I go, I can't avoid being the center of the stage. Tony Stark thought proudly. However, a new video appeared and interrupted his thoughts. Everyone clicked it, and their faces changed instantly, including Thor in Asgard, because at the beginning of the video, he saw himself fighting aliens on a flying vehicle. At this time, he no longer had the majesty of Thor, and he had fought to the point of being very tired. Although the video was a clip, it is completely imaginable how tragic the battle he had experienced before. However, before the battle was over, a huge Leviathan spaceship rushed out from the other side of the high-rise building. This Leviathan spaceship was like a huge whale, swimming in the air, completely ignoring the influence of gravity. At this time, Tony Stark flew over in armor and tried to cut the shell of the Leviathan spaceship with a laser, but Jarvis quickly reminded him, "Sir, before you cut its shell, the energy will be exhausted." At this time, even the slowest people reacted. This might be the Chitauri invasion mentioned in Lin Feng's diary. In addition to alien invasions, is it possible for such a spaceship to exist on Earth? In order to prevent the destruction of the Leviathan spaceship, Tony Stark flew directly in front of the Leviathan spaceship and said, "Jarvis, do you know the story of Jonah? I won't take him as a role model." Jarvis quickly reminded him. As he said that, Tony Stark accelerated and rushed into the body of the Leviathan spaceship, crashing the Leviathan spaceship, but he himself was also thrown into a daze. Just after getting up from the ground, he was knocked out by the Chitauri. The scene changed, and Hawkeye Barton saw that he had just knocked down a Chitauri, and then countless Chitauri rushed over in spacecraft. In an emergency, he could only pull out the arrow from a Chitauri soldier next to him, change the plug, jump down from the tall building, avoid the bombardment, and then fall into the building, and fall hard to the ground. He almost couldn't get up. He didn't have Tony Stark's armor as a buffer. This wave was enough to shake his internal organs out. The scene changed, and it was the Hulk roaring, but even as strong as the Hulk, he was bombarded by countless Chitauri soldiers driving flying vehicles. Everyone's face was extremely ugly. 2012 Alien Invasion. Now we have only seen the tip of the iceberg, and we are already exhausted. As strong as the Hulk and Thor, facing these endless aliens, they can't hold on. At the same time, Spider-Woman Gwen had just solved a crime and was sitting on the rooftop of the building, enjoying the breeze while looking at the records in her diary. Her face changed slightly. Although it was only a short clip, it was enough to prove how tragic the future battle in New York would be when aliens invaded. No wonder Lin Feng said at the beginning that he wanted to move out of New York. Now it was not only Lin Feng who thought so, but she also began to have such an idea. If there really was a day of alien invasion, then as a superhero, she would definitely have no choice but to do it. But what about her parents? They were just ordinary people, not superheroes, and they should not stay to die. But how would she persuade her father to leave at that time? For a moment, it was a headache. The scene continued, and one of the most advanced fighter jets of the US military drove out of the cabin. A sentence from the pilots here cheered everyone up. Commander Nick Fury has been relieved of his duties. Execute Order 7 or 11. 7 or 11 has been confirmed. We are ready to take off. The pilot did not ask why, but agreed directly. I've been fired? Nick Fury was stunned. It was like a thunderbolt. He never expected that he would see such a scene after watching the video. This is almost impossible. Because he is the director of SHIELD in this system, he is already the undisputed boss, and his superiors are only the 5 major members of the United Nations. Although he has gradually become the SHIELD of the United States, because he has been doing more for the United States, he is still a subordinate of the 5 major members in terms of procedures. So theoretically, if you want to remove him from his position, at least the 5 major members must agree together. The 5 major members have a veto power, and things must be agreed by all 5 to take effect. So even if he offended the representatives of several other member states at the same time, it doesn't matter, as long as the representative of the United States protects him. But now that he has been fired, even the representative of the United States will not speak for him. What did he do to make people so angry? He didn't understand. You know, there are constant conflicts of interest among the 5 major members, and it would be too difficult to get them to reach a consensus. It is almost impossible. The rest of the people also looked very serious. It was obvious that something serious had happened, but they didn't know it. Sir, there is something unusual on the deck. The scene changed, and Hill found something unusual in the control room of the aerospace carrier, and hurriedly said loudly, "Everyone, pay attention, a plane took off illegally." Nick Fury's face became even gloomier, because he also recognized it. Isn't this his aerospace carrier? Now someone on the aerospace carrier has taken off the plane beyond his authority? No, it should be said that he was relieved of his authority. So, what exactly happened in the future Battle of New York? Someone gave an order beyond his authority as the director. He immediately thought of the words of the female liaison just now, and immediately understood that there was only one possibility, that is, the 5 major members of the United Nations Council, even including the United States. Shoot him down. Repeat, his takeoff was not approved. Hill hurriedly ordered, but it was too late. The scene changed, and Nick Fury chased out. He held a rocket launcher and aimed at the fighter plane and blew it up with one shot. The plane exploded and caught fire and failed to take off directly, almost sliding off the deck. At this moment, another plane was flying out at lightning speed, and Nick Fury couldn't catch up. Obviously, it was a double insurance to ensure that the goal could be achieved in the end. Captain America Rogers watched from the side with a solemn expression. He was a veteran who had fought on the battlefield for many years, so he naturally understood that this was probably because Nick Fury had been dismissed from his post on the battlefield after disobeying orders. This is a very serious crime in the army. In the military, the most feared thing is disobedience and messing around. Tony Stark said with an equally bad face. Just now, Lin Feng's diary said that I carried a nuclear bomb. Could it be that there is a nuclear bomb on this plane? Tony Stark was talking and immediately realized that this was definitely directly related to the nuclear bomb. Are they crazy? That's New York, and they actually bombed New York directly? Hearing this judgment, Hawkeye Barton was so shocked that he almost jumped up. The most important thing is that he is still in New York, still fighting. What does this count as? Is it considered being abandoned? These people are really crazy. What is this place? This is New York, the most economically developed place in the United States. It can even be said bluntly that if there is a capital city in the world, then in the cognition of most people, the capital city of the world is in New York. In the entire history of mankind, only the Japanese have been hit by 2 atomic bombs, and those were dropped by the Americans. Why are they going to be dropped on the Americans now? What a ridiculous situation. Nick Fury also figured out why he disobeyed orders at this time. It was probably because the order was to bombard New York with nuclear bombs, which was a crazy order. As the director of SHIELD, he is not a regular military organization. He usually plays many tricks with his superiors, because the people above will only give you indicators, and how to complete them requires you to have flexible political skills. In addition, the 5 mothers-in-law above SHIELD are divided into 2 major camps to confront each other, so as long as he does not make people angry, this position is basically as stable as Mount Tay. In addition, he is very capable and has a wide network of contacts, so it is almost impossible for him to be fired, but now it has happened. I'm afraid the war situation has reached an uncontrollable point. Humans have even used nuclear weapons. Black Widow Natasha said solemnly. The dispatch of SHIELD fighters shows that this is the collective will of the highest level of humanity, including the US government. If there is any hope of winning, such an order would not be issued. I'm afraid the war situation is really irreversible, which is consistent with the scene they just saw. Where are the troops? Where are the troops stationed nearby? Why don't we see any troops? Captain America asked hurriedly. I'm afraid they have been defeated and facing aliens with far greater strength than us. Even if they are not defeated, they can't help much. Tony Stark said solemnly. Although the performance of these Chitauri is very strange and different from the civilization above level to that he imagined, there is no doubt that the technological level of these Chitauri is at least far superior to that of the current human beings on Earth. I'm afraid that even the strongest US military on Earth cannot defeat these aliens. Chapter 100. Iron Man carries a nuclear bomb, comparable to gods. Update 1. Everyone looked solemn. If the aliens had invaded to this extent, and the US government had to order a nuclear attack, it was easy to imagine how urgent the situation would be. The army was probably completely collapsed, and there was no hope here. If a nuclear attack was not carried out, it would spread, and be even more difficult to deal with. The consequences of ordering a nuclear bombing were very serious. It could be said that, even if you were doing it to protect all of humanity, and save more people, people would definitely not think so. Afterwards, they would basically resign and apologize. But even so, those politicians would rather sacrifice their political lives to order the bombing. The situation was so bad that one could imagine it. Therefore, Nick Fury, who disobeyed orders, was basically a heinous crime in the eyes of the 5 major countries' directors. Everyone looked extremely solemn. This was just an alien army under the cosmic overlord called Thanos, and it actually directly hit the most powerful United States on Earth and almost collapsed. Would it use nuclear bombs? If Thanos took action himself, what a terrifying existence he would be. However, before they could think about it, the video continued. Nick Fury failed to stop the plane from taking off. He rushed to the control tower and shouted into the Bluetooth headset, "Stark, did you hear that? a fighter plane with a nuclear bomb flew over. The scene changed, and Tony Stark asked solemnly, "How long will it take?" As soon as he finished speaking, he was knocked to the ground by a cannon of the Chitauri soldiers. Around him, countless Chitauri soldiers were attacking him frantically. If it weren't for the Mark armor, he would have died long ago. Even with the Mark armor, he couldn't resist for long. 3 minutes, it will destroy the entire city, Nick Fury shouted hurriedly. After hearing this, Tony Stark finally couldn't bear it anymore. He yelled, "Jarvis, send all the energy to the thrusters." "It's done." Jarvis still answered slowly. At this time, taking advantage of this time, Tony Stark directly shook off these Chitauri soldiers and flew towards the sky. On the sea, the fighter pilot pressed the launch button and a missile flew straight towards New York. The nuclear bomb has been launched. It will detonate in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Over. As soon as the pilot finished speaking, the fighter plane began to return to New York City, which was about to become a nuclear explosion purgatory. At this time, in the picture, Thor, who was wearing armor and holding a hammer, and Captain America Rogers were struggling to fight against each other, knocking down one Chitauri soldier after another. "It's me." Captain America Rogers also recognized the man holding a shield and looking very embarrassed. Who else could it be if not him? He was too familiar with this environment. Even with his strength, he almost couldn't survive in the war. War was so cruel. A muscular man who might have trained for 20 years and made countless efforts was taken away by a bullet in 1 second after entering the battlefield. Without waiting for everyone to think more, Thor in the picture had already repelled a group of Chitauri soldiers, overturned a car, and cleared a group of Chitauri soldiers. Then he came to Captain America, stretched out his hand, and helped him up. "Can we fight another round?" Thor asked. Captain America covered his stomach, which was hit by the laser just now. He was almost pierced. He panted and said, "What, are you sleepy?" Thor glanced at him, summoned his warhammer back, and said nothing. The two tough guys were holding on at this time. Both sides were exhausted. At this time, everyone saw the scene change, but it was Natasha, the Black Widow, who was holding a locust scepter in her hand, and then approached the middle device little by little. Dr. Silver shouted hurriedly on the side, "Face the top of it. I can close it." Natasha, the Black Widow, said while controlling the scepter to move forward. "Can anyone hear me? I can close the portal." "Close it quickly." Captain America shouted hurriedly, who was extremely embarrassed. "No, wait." Tony Stark's voice came from the combat headset. "Stark, there are more and more enemies." Captain America Steve Rogers looked up at the sky and shouted anxiously. He didn't know what Tony Stark wanted to do. The scene switched to Tony Stark, who said calmly, "I have a nuclear bomb here, and it will explode in a minute." In midair, Iron Man flew quickly, chasing the nuclear bomb. The speed of the nuclear bomb was extremely fast, but Iron Man was even faster. After concentrating all the energy on his legs, the speed was even more amazing. "I know where to send it." Iron Man seemed to have made the final decision. Finally, Tony Stark caught up with the nuclear bomb and carried it on his shoulders. Almost in an instant, he was above New York. "Stark, you are going without return." The voice of Captain America Steve Rogers appeared and advised. "You saw the energy to turn, Jarvis." Tony Stark did not listen to the advice. At this time, everyone finally understood what Lin Feng's diary said about Tony Stark carrying a nuclear bomb. Everyone looked at Tony Stark with a different look. They never thought that this playboy would have such a day. No wonder Lin Feng said that after he experienced life and death, he had undergone earth-shaking changes and finally achieved the achievement of being on par with gods with a mortal body. There are reasons for this. Tony Stark also enjoyed the eyes of the crowd. This was different from the admiration he had enjoyed before because of his money and status. It was the appreciation and admiration of the crowd for his righteous sacrifice. Do you understand the value of these people's admiration? Tactical retreat. Tony, I have to say that I look at you with a new perspective. I underestimated you before. Captain America Rogers said apologetically. I still look at people with tinted glasses. I didn't expect that this playboy would have such awareness at this time. It was really surprising. Tony Stark's face turned black. What does it mean? It means that you have never looked up to me before, right? At this time, he wanted to burst out a word starting with F, but thinking that the young old man in front of him was a good friend of his father, he held back. At the same time, when he was proud, he also felt a little more emotional because he finally understood what Lin Feng said in the diary. Without experiencing the life and death in Afghanistan and the life and death disaster at palladium poisoning, did he really have such an awareness? It was hard for him to say. At least if he was allowed to think calmly, he might not be able to make a decision so quickly and make a decision immediately in a short time, even if it would sacrifice himself. He also saw himself in the picture, with grey hair on his temples. What was going on? You know, it's only 2009 now, and the alien invasion has only been 12 years. It's only 3 years later. Now he is in his prime, and is at the peak of his life. Isn't it the same in 3 years? But his temples still have grey hair. What does this mean? This shows that the experience in Afghanistan and the torture of palladium poisoning later made him grow very fast, but at the same time, his psychological pressure also exploded, so he became much older after 3 years. Otherwise, Europeans and Americans do age quickly, but not so fast. After all, they were less than 40 years old at that time. He could fully imagine how many helpless and self-blaming things he faced in another timeline. He was very clear about his character. He was definitely not the type to let go of others casually, nor was he the type to take things one step at a time. So now he has not experienced those life and death events. For his growth, it may lag behind, but for his own health, it is a good thing. He is now determined not to let such a situation happen again, and he must do his best to strengthen himself. In the picture, Jarvis asked very considerately, "Sir, do you want to contact Miss Pepper?" At that moment, a trace of entanglement flashed across Iron Man's face, but he still pretended to be indifferent and said, "Contact." At this time, Jarvis knew that the person he valued most was Pepper, and he had to admit it, because this time, it was really unpredictable whether he would live or die, and there was even a high probability that he would die. He chose to face his heart. Even Tony Stark outside the screen couldn't help being touched, because he was also Tony Stark. He had no idea how many women he had experienced in his life, how many one-night stands he had, so many women that he couldn't even remember their names, let alone their appearances. But Pepper was different. All the women added together were not as heavy as one of her fingers. He could choose to entrust all his wealth to Pepper and be a hands-off boss without worrying about anything. Whether he admitted it or not, he had to face his feelings for Pepper. But at this time, on the private plane, Pepper was staring at the scene on the TV news, obviously very worried about Tony Stark's safety. The streets in New York City have become a battlefield, and the army has arrived. They are trying to control the situation, but obviously they are no match at all. I have to say that I have never seen such a scene in my career. We don't know much about this response team yet, but we recognized Iron Man, billionaire, Tony Stark. Obviously, Pepper was so nervous watching the news that she missed the farewell call with Tony Stark. But the people outside the screen were cheered up. Through the TV news that Pepper was watching, they vaguely got a glimpse of the battlefield situation other than that of these superheroes. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.